Chapter 192. Although that genius wasn't as strong as Xia Yubing, Yiguchen, and the others, he was still a genius who had reached the 8th cycle of qi refinement. However, he was swallowed by the black shadow without even having the chance to react. When the black shadow slowly revealed itself, the faces of all the geniuses turned pale and their lips trembled. This black shadow was shockingly a python-like demonic beast. Its entire body was covered in pitch-black scales that seemed to be cast from gold and iron. Its python head was incomparably ferocious. What was even more shocking was that there seemed to be 2 black horns protruding from its head. That's a 5th-grade black dragon python. Some of the geniuses cried out in shock. A 5th-grade monster was comparable to a hidden gate of life and death. Yiguchen's pupils suddenly shrank. From the pressure and evil aura emanating from the black dragon python, he could tell that it had reached the peak of the 5th grade. This black dragon python is even stronger than the heavenly fire golden eyes beast that Jun Xiaoyao fought before. Yiguchen quickly retreated. A 5th-grade monster like the heavenly fire golden eyes beast was comparable to a hidden gate of life and death. However, a 5th-grade monster like the black dragon python was comparable to a spiritual bridge of life and death. It was invincible. Yiguchen was very decisive. He knew that the venerable cavern was definitely not that simple. They couldn't go any further and could only retreat. Yiguchen, Xia Yubing, and the others were the first to retreat, so they were also the furthest away from the black dragon python. The black dragon python, on the other hand, was filled with evil aura and was extremely ferocious. Its bloody mouth could easily swallow a genius. The various martial arts techniques of the geniuses couldn't cause any real damage to the black dragon python. Looking at the one-sided slaughter, Yiguchen sighed slightly. At the same time, the 5-colored golden core in his vital ring trembled even more violently with the appearance of the black dragon python. What does the 5-colored golden core have to do with the black dragon python? Or does the black dragon python have some effect on the 5-colored golden core? Yiguchen was puzzled. However, he couldn't verify anything right now, let alone attack the black dragon python. The black dragon python should have a trace of atavistic dragon blood in its body. This 5-colored golden core also has the azure dragon totem. This is the only connection between them. However, this matter should be left for the future. This was the only thing Yiguchen could think of. The black dragon python continued to pursue them from behind. Yiguchen and the others used their extreme speed to quickly leave the cave. Finally, they emerged from the pitch-black underground cave and arrived at the center of the stone forest. Hiss! As soon as the incomparably thick black dragon python emerged from the underground cave, the inscriptions on the surface of the surrounding 9 stone pillars flickered, as if some kind of sealing array had been activated. The black dragon python's body was instantly trapped, and it could only let out an unwilling roar that shook the sky. The roar caused the faces of the sky prides who had barely managed to escape to turn pale, and fear lingered in their hearts. Many martial artists had entered the ancient stone forest, but less than 1/10 of them had managed to escape. Most of them had been killed by the spirit-siphoning bugs, the cave's array, and the black dragon python. Moreover, they had not truly obtained the opportunity of the cave. Everyone knew that the real opportunity of this venerable cave was most likely behind the blood-colored door guarded by the black dragon python. Unfortunately, with this peak rank 5 demonic beast guarding it, they would definitely not be able to break through with their qi refinement realm strength. This was also the reason why the 7 superpowers were able to safely allow them to enter first to obtain the opportunity. Let's leave this stone forest first. Yiguchen waved his hand. With the black dragon python's presence, it was impossible for them to enter the cave again. The only thing they could do now was to leave the stone forest first and then seize the ownership of this cave. Is this finally the moment? Yiguchen muttered in his heart. The remaining sky prides all left this place and walked out of the ancient stone forest. Outside the stone forest, the 7 superpowers and a large number of martial artists were all waiting quietly. They all knew that the Venerable One's cave abode was the final destination of the elite meeting. Whoever could truly obtain this cave would be the most eye-catching existence in this elite meeting. Oh, they're out. Some of the spectating martial artists also saw a few sparse figures walking out of the stone forest. There are only so few people left? Many of the martial artists were shocked. Greed is not enough, Xian Tai sneered from the limitless sword sex camp. It could be said that he was determined to obtain this venerable cave. At the same time, Xian Tai also knew that most of the people who entered to obtain the opportunity did not have the chance to come out alive. As time passed, a small number of people, including Yi Guchen, walked out of the stone forest. Seeing Yi Guchen walk out unscathed, Qin Baijian and the other two experts' faces darkened. They had hoped that Yi Guchen would die in the venerable cave. That way, they would not have to do anything. Unfortunately, the situation did not develop as they had expected. Sensing the murderous gazes of the three experts, Yi Guchen's expression remained calm. As long as he obtained this venerable cave, all life and death crises would be easily resolved. As all the remaining geniuses came out, the entire place fell into an eerie silence. In this silence, only the sound of sand whistling could be heard. Whether it was the 7 superpowers or the tens of thousands of spectating martial artists, they all held their breaths. Because they knew that the following battle would be the most tragic. The remaining prodigies would fight for the final rights to this venerable cave. Now it's interesting. Xian Tai lowered his head and looked down. Qing Qi, who do you think will be the final winner of this elite meeting? Elder Qing asked. According to strength, the most likely winners should be Xia Yubing, Yuan Mie, and Shinta Miao. However, Dugubai has the battle record of killing Qin Aoshi. He's also a strong dark horse. Chu Qingqi hesitated. However, he also sighed. It was a pity that Yi Guchen did not come. Xia Shishir and Xia of the Xia family were among the spectating crowd. There will only be one biggest winner of this elite meeting, and that's Sister Yubing. Xia's gaze was fanatical as she stared at Xia Yubing. In her heart, Xia Yubing was an unparalleled genius. On the other hand, Xia Shishir's gaze quietly fell on Yi Guchen's figure. Xia Shishir felt an indescribable sense of familiarity towards the young man who had saved her. On the other side, Princess Yuanyang was also among the spectating crowd. She did not pass the 3rd stage, so she did not have the qualifications to participate in the 4th stage. Yi Guchen, you really didn't come. If that incident hadn't happened in the Sword King's secret realm back then, perhaps the one who shines in this elite meeting would not be Xia Yubing, but your sword sex Yi Guchen. Princess Yuanyang shook her head. There was a hint of disappointment in her eyes and bitterness at the corner of her mouth. The figure she was infatuated with did not even have the courage to participate in the elite meeting? Big brother, you must win. In the crowd, the petite Shui clenched her small hands in front of her chest as if she was praying. At this moment, everyone had different thoughts in their hearts. However, the only thing they had in common was that they were all looking forward to the real final battle. Chapter 193. Outside the ancient stone forest, strong winds swept up the yellow sand, whistling endlessly. Although there were tens of thousands of people in the surroundings, there wasn't the slightest bit of noise. Instead, it was extremely quiet. It was so quiet that it seemed as if they were waiting for something. Outside the stone forest, neither Xia Yubing nor Yi Guchen moved. She's really patient. Yi Guchen glanced at Xia Yubing from the corner of his eye. Xia Yubing was a very shrewd person. He didn't believe that she wasn't prepared, nor did he believe that she didn't have any trump cards. However, although Xia Yubing was unfathomable, Yi Guchen wasn't a pushover either. As if sensing the heavy atmosphere, Chu Shiqing, Song Daozhen and the other Heaven's Prides exchanged a glance before leaving with a bitter smile. They directly gave up on fighting for the venerable cave dwelling. They knew that with their strength, trying to take the cave dwelling was no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Rather than being beaten back by others, it was better for them to retreat first. There were quite a few Heaven's Prides who had such thoughts, but there were also quite a few who wanted to fight with their lives on the line. There are quite a few people who aren't afraid of death. Shinta Miao rested the terrifying saber on his shoulder as he scanned the surroundings and shook his head with a cold smile. In such a situation, those who didn't retreat had the mentality to fight with their lives on the line. After all, Apart from the Sword Sect Tower Forest where wind-sweeping building was, the other 6 factions had all thrown out tempting chips. It could be said that whoever obtained the venerable cave dwelling would ascend to the heavens in a single bound and become the most dazzling existence in the entire Saint Origin Empire. Their future would also be limitlessly bright. There were quite a few Heaven's Prides who were willing to risk their lives for a future. I want this cave dwelling. Whoever wants to fight, feel free to come. Yuan Mie stepped forward with a blood-stained sword in his hand as he scanned the surroundings with his deathly still eyes. TSK, as expected of the second on the Heaven's Pride list. How bold. Yuan Mie is a rare sword's Heaven's Pride. Like Xia Yubing, he has comprehended sword intent. He is one of the most likely candidates to obtain the venerable cave dwelling. Regardless of whether it was the spectators or the 7 forces, they all began to whisper to each other. However, no one thought that Yuan Mie was overestimating himself. His strength was indeed worthy of his current cold arrogance. Yuan Mie, how dare a bastard like you talk nonsense here? Prince Yuan stood out and said in a cold tone. How could he sit back and watch Yuan Mie obtain this venerable immortal abode? If he really got it, he would be completely left behind by Yuan Mie. Therefore, Prince Yuan could not let Yuan Mie get the cave abode no matter what. Although I can't kill you due to orders, it shouldn't be a problem to teach you a lesson. Yuan Mie's eyes were cold. His figure suddenly disappeared and appeared in front of Prince Yuan in an instant. Prince Yuan's expression changed as he hurriedly took out the heavenly sacred 5 elements wheel. This was like a fuse, completely igniting the quiet atmosphere. This supremacy's cave abode is mine. One of the Sky Prides suddenly attacked the Sky Prides beside him with bloodshot eyes. If I can get my hands on this cavern, I'll have a meteoric rise, and I'll be able to choose any of the 7 great powers. I'll fight to the death and come back from the jaws of death. I'll obtain the greatest opportunity. The whole situation was like a bomb that completely detonated. Boom, boom, boom. Countless streams of true chi intertwined violently, scattering the wind and sand in the sky. That kind of crazy attack caused the spectators to be speechless, and they were secretly shocked in their hearts. Let's get into formation. The upper echelons of the 7 great powers acted almost at the same time. Powerful surging true chi overflowed and intertwined with each other, forming a giant true chi shield that covered a large area outside the stone forest. It became the battlefield for these Sky Prides to fight, and at the same time, prevent the true chi from spreading and attacking the crowd. Within the true chi shield, the Sky Prides fought wildly and fiercely. Even if they died in such a bloody battle, the forces behind them could not complain because they were willing to do so. Song Daojin and Chu Shiqing, who were outside the true chi shield, stared at Yi Guchen's figure. After Yi Guchen saved their lives, they had a guess in their hearts, but they could not confirm it. The reason for that was because they felt that this was too absurd and unreal. Dugubai, who are you? Chu Shiqing's eyes flashed with a strange light as she muttered to herself. Yi Guchen was still standing calmly within the protective shield of his vital energy. He was watching the elites fighting each other. Silly boy, what should we do? Su Jianshi asked. She didn't have any thoughts about the venerable cave. As for Zither Fairy and Bai Yanji, they also had an accurate understanding of their own strength. With their strength, they couldn't obtain the cave, so they tactfully didn't make a move. Wait a bit. She hasn't made a move yet. Yi Guchen narrowed his eyes and looked at Xia Yubing. Xia Yubing's expression was as calm as a virgin's. In the midst of the fierce battle, she was like a snow lotus that stood aloof from the world. If he didn't have his previous experience, just by looking at Xia Yubing, she was indeed an otherworldly beauty. However, only Yi Guchen, who knew the truth, understood how cold and dark her heart was under such a beautiful appearance. Xia Yubing, I'm going to tear off your mask. Yi Guchen's gaze was extremely sharp. That Murong Ditian was actually injured. Suddenly, cries of surprise rang out from the crowd of spectators. Murong Ditian, who possessed the Mara sword, was definitely one of the strongest opponents. However, at this moment, a gray-robed man was attacking him without fear of death. Damn it. For you. I have no enmity with you, but you actually attacked me so ruthlessly. Murong Ditian's expression was unsightly as blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. He was also caught off guard by this gray-robed man's sneak attack and suffered heavy injuries. However, the gray-robed man didn't say a word. Instead, his attacks became fiercer and fiercer. The gray-robed man slowly raised his hand, and a terrifying sword Qi soared into the sky. This is the killing move of a spirit-grade sword art. Murong Ditian's mouth twitched as he tightly gripped the Mara sword in his hand. He originally thought that his opponent would be Xia Yubing, Dugubai, and the others. However, he didn't expect that he would be in such a sorry state against a gray-robed man. Mysterious heaven sword art, sword shaking the universe. Murong Ditian also used the killing move of the mysterious heaven sword art and collided with the gray-robed man. Ferocious sword Qi spread out in all directions, causing the surrounding sky prides to spit out blood as they were sent flying. That gray-robed man is actually so powerful. I have never heard of his name before. The gray-robed man seems to be called Hong Chen Shui. He didn't reveal his strength in the previous rounds, and only now did he reveal his full strength. However, why do I feel that every move of hers is a killing move? What kind of deep hatred does she have with that Murong Ditian? The spectators were all whispering to each other. Obviously, they were very curious about Hong Chen Shui who had suddenly attacked. Yiguchen's gaze turned towards the gray-robed man as he frowned slightly. He had a vague feeling in his heart, but he couldn't explain it clearly. Chapter 194. Just as the battle between the geniuses reached its climax, Xia Yubing, who had been silent all this while, finally made a move. She took light steps and slowly stepped forward. With every step she took, the sword intent in her body would spread a little. In the end, a terrifying sword intent soared into the sky, as if it was going to sweep in all directions. As the sword intent spread, the surrounding temperature rapidly dropped, and snowflakes began to fall from the sky. This was simply inconceivable. The heavenly wasteland plains was a place where gales howled all year round, and yellow sand filled the sky. Yet, at this moment, snowflakes were falling. Although it was only limited to a small region outside the stone forest, it was enough to make people speechless and feel astonished. Xia Yubing walked out in the wind and snow just like that, like an ice goddess, and had an awe-inspiring temperament. The snowflakes fluttering in the air also caused the many heavens prides who were fighting to stop. Their gazes all turned towards Xia Yubing in shock. Even Murong Ditian, Hong Chen Shui, Shinta Miao, Prince Yuani, Yuan Mie, and other top-notch geniuses temporarily stopped and looked at Xia Yubing with extremely serious gazes. Everyone, it's already meaningless to continue fighting because this abode will be obtained by Yubing. Xia Yubing spoke with a voice that was cold like ice. Xia Yubing, although you're a genius, you can't be so domineering, a genius said indignantly. Oh, is that so? Looks like Yubing hasn't displayed enough strength and skills. Xia Yubing shook her head indifferently. Just as that genius wanted to say something, his body suddenly froze, and the snowflakes that fell on him directly turned into rays of sword Qi, piercing into his body. With a plop, that genius directly fell to the ground, dead. Such a method made the hearts of many spectators go cold, and their backs go numb. Could it be that she's already taken that step? Even Yuan Mie, who was always serious, had his pupils shrink at this moment. Because only he, who had also comprehended sword intent, understood what it meant. Xia Yubing's comprehension of the sword intent of ice had almost reached the extreme, which was why she had such a shocking method. At this moment, the world was silent. Snowflakes fluttered, making Xia Yubing look like a fairy exiled from a snowy mountain. The gazes of the 7 great forces and tens of thousands of cultivators all landed on her. At this moment, Xia Yubing was the most eye-catching existence in this world. Finally, we've reached this step. Although Xia Yubing's expression was calm, great waves were surging in her heart. She had finally succeeded in realizing her ambition, becoming the most dazzling existence in this world and even the entire Saint Origin dynasty. Today, Yubing will be bold once again. Not only will I inherit the Venerable One's abode, I will also inherit the name of the Sword Sect. Xia Yubing said with a clear and cold voice. As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. Even some of the higher-ups of the 7 great powers had never imagined that Xia Yubing would actually possess such ambition. Not only did she intend to seize an exalt abode, she even intended to seize Yiguchen's title of Sword Master. Many martial artists were also in an uproar as they discussed animatedly. However, Xia Yubing's methods from before still greatly intimidated them. Adding on the fact that the rumored sword sex Yiguchen had never appeared, the majority of the people still leaned towards Xia Yubing. That's right, we support Miss Xia to inherit the title of Sword Master. That Yiguchen, he's not worthy. Someone shouted from the crowd. No one knew that he was a disciple of the Xia family. That's right, Yiguchen is just a coward. Even now, the elite meeting has ended and he still hasn't appeared. He's afraid of Miss Xia. What qualifications does a dog-shit genius like him have to be called Sword Master? Miss Xia will be the new Sword Master. In the beginning, there were only a few people shouting. However, in the end, it almost became a wave of voices that covered the sky and covered the earth as they shouted Xia Yubing's name. Xia Yubing's lips curled into a faint smile. This was the effect she wanted. Ever since the elite meeting had proposed to remove the title of Sword Master, Xia Yubing had been building momentum for herself. Her strong performance along the way, as well as suppressing the other geniuses, were all for her own sake. In the end, with the cooperation of the chess pieces she had arranged to guide the public opinion, she successfully became the successor of Sword Master. It had to be said that from every angle, Xia Yubing's plan could be said to be perfect. However, Yiguchen had never appeared. This was the reason why Xia Yubing dared to carry out this plan. This little girl's schemes are a bit deep. Sword Sect Pagoda Forest's Elder Qin, he shook his head. He didn't like this kind of shrewd genius. Brother Yisai? Chu Qingqi shook his head, slightly disappointed. It seems that the title of Sword Master will be inherited by Xia Yubing. Xian Tai was considering how to take Xia Yubing into the Limitless Sword Sect. As if seeing that the situation had been decided, the smile on Xia Yubing's lips could no longer be suppressed. After waiting for so long, this day has finally come. Yiguchen, I'm no longer that weak girl who would only follow behind you and stand in the shadow of your light. I will inherit everything you have. Let me replace you, to shine with endless brilliance. Xia Yubing muttered in her heart. Her aura erupted uncontrollably. This aura wasn't just made up of true qi, but also contained traces of soul power. This pressure. Half-step divine soul. The surrounding geniuses looked at Xia Yubing in disbelief. Even geniuses like Yuan Mie and Shinta Miao were only at the peak of the 9th cycle of qi refining. As for Xia Yubing, she had been hiding her aura all this time, but she had already reached half-step divine soul. Xia Yubing hid her strength so deeply. Su Jianshi and the others were shocked. When Xia Yubing truly revealed the strength of a half-step divine soul, all of the geniuses present were intimidated. The crowd cheered even louder for Xia Yubing becoming the new Sword Master. It seems that this gathering is over. The final victor is indeed Xia Yubing, muttered Xian Tai. The people from the 7 factions all believed that the dust had settled and that there was no need to compete anymore. Xia Yubing's aura, cultivation, and every other aspect had suppressed everyone present. There was no doubt that she would be the final victor. Damn it, why did this woman have to win in the end? There's also that Sword Master Yiguchen. I've always thought of him as a worthy opponent, but he didn't even appear. This is infuriating. Su Jianshi puffed up her cheeks and stomped her feet in resentment. Then do you want him to appear? The youth beside Su Jianshi, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke. But, silly boy, what do you mean? Su Jianshi was a little confused. She looked at Yiguchen in confusion. It's time, said Yiguchen with a smile. He patted Su Jianshi's shoulder and slowly stepped forward. At this moment, Su Jianshi, Zither Fairy, and Bai Yanji were all surprised by Yiguchen's actions. Thank you for not abandoning me. Since that's the case, Yubing will officially take over the title of Sword Master and become. Xia Yubing's voice was cold as it spread in all directions. However, before she could finish speaking, a cold shout resounded through the heavens and earth. Are you worthy of the title of Sword Master? This cold shout was like the edge of a sword that fiercely cut through the clamor between the heavens and earth. For a moment, it was as if all the voices had been cut off. Everyone's gazes uniformly landed on the black-robed youth who was slowly walking out. Duguubai, what qualifications do you have to say such words? Xia Yubing coldly rebuked. She frowned in annoyance. In her eyes, although Duguubai was a threat, she was a half-step divine soul cultivator. She might be able to suppress him. Oh, if Duguubai's identity isn't enough, then what about this identity? Yiguchen revealed a cold smile. He slowly raised his hand, placed it against his chin, and slowly tore off the disguise mask. As the mask fell off, his ordinary face disappeared. What replaced it was a cold and arrogant face with sharp eyebrows and bright eyes. At the same time, he took out his iconic Tribulation Dust Sword. He slowly raised the sword and pointed its tip at Xia Yubing. I am the Sword Master. Who dares to challenge me? Chapter 195. I am the Sword Sect, who dares to challenge me? When Yiguchen uttered these words, the already quiet atmosphere became even more deathly still, to the point of suffocation. Among the tens of thousands of spectators, there were quite a few who supported Xia Yubing. However, at this moment, those clamors and shouts seemed to be stuck in their throats. Every single cultivator's face was flushed red, and their eyes were wide open. They felt as if they were hallucinating as they stared at the youth who had removed his mask. This person is... Some people's teeth were even trembling. That familiar yet unfamiliar face made everyone feel as if they were in a dream. Duguubai, is the Sword Sect's Yiguchen. Someone let out a cry of disbelief, incomparably shocked. Whoosh, a tidal wave of uproar surged out like a surging tide. Not to mention the tens of thousands of spectators, even the people from the 7 major factions had stunned expressions on their faces. All along, Xia Yubing had belittled, looked down upon, and viewed as a coward by everyone. Not only had the Sword Sect's Yiguchen come, he had even transformed into the Duguubai right before their eyes. In the first round, he had shocked everyone with his talent, becoming a potential dark horse. In the second round, he had unleashed his sword in a rage for a beauty, killing Qin Badian and the other 2 geniuses. In the third round, he had defeated Lu Tianying, and even lasted 15 minutes against the Sun Moon Hall's divine soul realm genius, Xianing. In the fourth round, he had defeated the bloody battle spear monarch, Qin Aoshi, in a domineering manner. Such battle results had never appeared in the history of the Elite Association. Therefore, this made everyone pay close attention to the sudden appearance of the dark horse, Duguubai. They even believed that he was not inferior to Yuan Mie, Shinta Miao, Xia Yubing, and the others, and was a true peak genius. But now, the Duguubai that made everyone feel incomparably shocked was actually the coward Yiguchen that Xia Yubing had ridiculed and had never appeared. Such a change, as if heaven and earth had turned upside down, caused everyone to be stunned, as if they had fallen into a dream. The upper echelons of the 7 major forces were a little dazed. For a moment, they couldn't come back to their senses. He had killed so many Heaven's favorites and killed his way out of the encirclement. If even such a Heaven's favorite was considered trash, then how could the others live? In an instant, many gazes landed on Xia Yubing. Among these gazes, some were questioning, some were strange, some were mocking, and some were waiting for a good show. After all, from the very beginning, Xia Yubing had never concealed her ambition to become a sword master. Previously, he had spared no effort to smear Yiguchen's name, making him an existence that everyone despised. But now, the cowardly coward Yiguchen that Xia Yubing spoke of had not only appeared, he had even appeared right before Xia Yubing's eyes from start to finish. Furthermore, he had even displayed all sorts of astonishing accomplishments. This was undoubtedly a slap to Xia Yubing's face. Yiguchen didn't even need to say a single word to put Xia Yubing in an extremely awkward and ashamed state. Even those martial artists who had clamored for Xia Yubing to become a sword master felt their cheeks burn with pain. Their shouts were stuck in their throats, and the shock in their eyes didn't disperse for a long time. No. How is this possible? How is it possible that it's you? Yigu, If one were to talk about the person whose emotions were fluctuating the most at this moment, it would undoubtedly be Xia Yubing. When she saw the familiar yet unfamiliar handsome face under the human skin mask, Xia Yubing's mind went blank, as if 100,000 thunderbolts had exploded. She couldn't believe it, and she wasn't willing to believe it. The Yi Guqin that she had always looked down on and wanted to trample under her feet was actually Duguwubai. One moment in heaven, one moment in hell. This kind of disparity, for Xia Yubing, was simply an extremely absurd feeling. When Yi Guqin hadn't appeared at the start of the elite gathering, Xia Yubing was still sneering in her heart. She had thought too highly of Yi Guqin and didn't even dare to appear at the elite gathering. But now, looking at it, Xia Yubing felt like she was a clown. Everything she did was seen by Yi Guqin, who had transformed into Dugubai. Her countless schemes, her shrewdness, and her plan to seize the title of Sword Master were all shattered the moment Yi Guqin revealed his true identity. Because Dugubai's battle achievements were already enough to shock everyone. And Yi Guqin revealing his identity at this moment caused his reputation to soar like the sun in the sky. After all, a single Dugubai was already incomparably shocking. If this Dugubai's true identity was still the Sword Master that had risen up once again, then his influence would be even greater. Yi Guqin had only revealed his face, yet all of Xia Yubing's schemes had been destroyed, and it had even caused Yi Guqin's reputation to soar. This enormous contrast made Xia Yubing's mind dizzy for a moment. She couldn't even stand steadily, and felt as if she was about to fall. Xia Yubing's expression continuously changed, alternating between green and white, and her face was filled with disbelief. Yi Guqin faintly smiled as he touched his face, and said with an indifferent tone, "Xia Yubing, how long has it been since you last saw me? Have you already forgotten what I look like?" If it were someone who didn't know, they would think that it was a conversation between lovers who hadn't seen each other for a long time. However, in the past, Yi Guqin and Xia Yubing's relationship was indeed like that. But now, Yi Guqin's words only caused Xia Yubing's expression to become even more unsightly. She felt as if she had nowhere to vent her feelings of depression. Dugubai, Yi Guqin, heh, Yubing really is smart all her life, but stupid this time. Xia Yubing tightly knitted her brows, and her jade-like hands clutched her chest. Her heart seemed to ache faintly. Of course, it wasn't because she was injured, but because her anger had attacked her heart. Those who humiliate others will be humiliated by others. Your schemes have been exhausted, and your life has been ruined. Yi Guqin pointed his meteor soft sword at Xia Yubing. The atmosphere between the two seemed to have frozen. However, the shock in the hearts of the surrounding spectators still continued. "Brother Yi, you really hid it from me?" Chu Qingqi shook his head and smiled bitterly. On the side, Elder Qinghe's old face was also a little red. This was because he had some prejudice against the Sword Master who hadn't come yet. Now that his identity was revealed, he felt a little embarrassed. Only Feng Manlu's face was calm, and he wasn't surprised at all. Although he was blind, his heart was as clear as a mirror. Perhaps he had already guessed this. As for the Limitless Sword sect, Lu Tianying's mind was in a mess, and he was speechless. He didn't expect that Dugubai was the Sword Master who had made him lose face at the sword-seeking steel. However, at this moment, only fear was left in Lu Tianying's eyes as he looked at Yi Guqin. Just Dugubai alone was enough to frighten him. At this moment, when the two identities were added together, Lu Tianying didn't dare to have any thoughts of revenge against Yi Guqin. Dugubai is the Sword Master. With such a temperament, this boy is unfathomable. Xian Tai was also very surprised. On the side, Xian Ying's pupils suddenly shrank. Yi Guqin was the second junior who could be evaluated by Xian Tai as unfathomable. As for the first person, it was naturally the top genius of the Sun Moon Hall, Xian Hao. This made Xian Ying unhappy, and at the same time, he also had a deep fear of Yi Guqin. In addition, Qin Baijian and the other two spiritual bridge of heaven and earth experts who had been watching the battle all this time looked even more serious. The killing intent in their eyes became so strong that it couldn't be dispersed. This boy must die. Chapter 196. Among the tens of thousands of cultivators, Princess Yuanyang stood there in a daze. It's him. It's really him. The person I like will never disappoint me. Princess Yuanyang covered her red lips with her hands as her vision blurred. Yi Guqin, who had disappointed her, was actually Dugubai, who had saved her life. This unexpected turn of events made Princess Yuanyang feel like she was in a dream. The person she was infatuated with would rise again like a blazing sun, even more dazzling than before. As for Princess Yuanyang, she could no longer have anything to do with Yi Guqin. There was another woman who felt the same way as Princess Yuanyang. It was Xia Shirshir. I finally understand what you mean by repaying the karma of that day. Xia Shirshir smiled as tears streamed down her face. Repaying the karma meant that they were no longer involved. How is this possible? That trash. He's actually Dugu Wubai. Xia Yinger was stunned as her mind went blank. She hated Yi Guqin, but she had a trace of respect for Dugu Wubai, who had saved her life. Xia Yinger couldn't accept this and felt like she was being torn apart. As for Song Daojin and Chu Shiqing, although they had some guesses, they couldn't be sure. Now that Yi Guqin's true identity was revealed, Song Daojin and Chu Shiqing could only look at each other with bitter smiles. They were once the 7 prodigies of the Milky Way province, but the gap between them and Yi Guqin was like heaven and earth. Yi Guqin and Xia Yubing were facing each other inside the true Qi barrier. The surrounding prodigies, Yuan Mie, Shinta Miao, and the others were also looking at Yi Guqin in astonishment. However, there were only 3 people who were the most shocked. One of them was Su Jianshi. She didn't expect that the taciturn youth who had traveled with her was Yi Guqin, the famous sword sex Yi Guqin. At the same time, he was the opponent that Su Jianshi wanted to spar with. Foolish brat, you actually deceived me for so long. I'll deal with you later, but... Su Jianshi glanced at Yi Guqin's handsome side profile with her heart beating wildly. He looks more handsome in person than in the mask. Su Jianshi's focus was different from the others. As for Murong Ditian, he was staring at Yi Guqin with a hateful gaze that seemed as if he was going to devour Yi Guqin. The grudges between him and Yi Guqin couldn't be resolved. Now that Yi Guqin had revealed his true form, Murong Ditian felt as if he was being toyed with. This was something that Murong Ditian was unable to accept. However, he did not act rashly because the threat that Yi Guqin posed to him now was even greater than before. As for the last person, it was the gray-robed man. When he saw Yi Guqin, his body trembled violently. It's actually you, young Master Yi. The gray-robed man whispered. If Yi Guqin were to hear this voice, he would definitely recognize it. However, right now, Yi Guqin clearly didn't notice the gray-robed man. His gaze was fixed on Xia Yubing. Although Xia Yubing's expression fluctuated and her emotions fluctuated violently, she gradually calmed down. Tens of thousands of cultivators from the 7 great forces were all looking at Xia Yubing and Yi Guqin. There was no need to talk about the enmity between them. Yi Guqin, you have indeed surprised Yubing. Yubing didn't expect that you, who viciously plotted against me in the Sword Monarch's secret realm, would actually appear in front of me as if nothing had happened. Xia Yubing bit her red lips lightly. There wasn't the slightest bit of hesitation when she said these words that inverted black and white. It was as if this was the truth. Not only that, there seemed to be a bit of mist appearing in her ice-blue eyes. Xia Yubing was crying? Many cultivators were stunned for a moment. One had to know that Xia Yubing's temperament had always been cold and calm. She was like a fairy exiled from a snowy mountain. She didn't show much emotion. A little girl's action like crying had almost never appeared on Xia Yubing's face before. However, she was crying now. Sparkling teardrops hung on her eyelashes. She wasn't crying loudly, but her faint sobbing was even more heart-wrenching. Yeah, so what if this Yi Guqin appeared? Previously, Lady Xia and this Yi Guqin were publicly acknowledged as Dao companions. In the end, Yi Guqin went crazy and plotted against Lady Xia in the Sword Monarch's secret realm. With such a person, no matter how strong he is, it's hard for him to bear the title of Sword Master. It was unknown where such a voice came from among the many cultivators. Yeah, even an ice fairy like Lady Xia could be so ruthless as to plot against her, all for the sake of monopolizing the Sword Monarch's inheritance. This Yiguchen's character is so insidious. What qualifications does he have to be a sword master? At first, it was only 1 or 2 people. Later, many cultivators began to curse. At this moment, Xia Yubing was like a pear blossom in the rain. Her sobbing appearance was indeed pitiful. Some of the male warriors who were infatuated with Xia Yubing even wanted to rush into the real Qi shield and fight Yiguchen to the death. Yiguchen is a hypocrite. He plotted against Fairy Yubing. He's a despicable person. How can such a person be a sword master? It seemed that someone had fanned the flames. The situation that had been overturned by Yiguchen seemed to be reversed again. Shameless. Su Jianshi was furious. She gritted her teeth and felt wronged for Yiguchen. She knew very well what kind of person Yiguchen was. However, among the tens of thousands of cultivators, there were still people who continued to curse. However, there were also some who remained on the sidelines and watched the situation develop. Things are getting more interesting now. The upper echelons of the 7 major factions were clearly not ignorant people. However, they didn't stand out either. They only watched the contest between the two. No matter who won in the end, it didn't matter to the 7 major factions. Only the prodigy who won in the end was qualified to gain their favor. Yiguchen's expression didn't change amidst the cursing. He turned his gaze to Xia Yubing. Xia Yubing covered her face with her jade-like hands and seemed to be crying. However, the corners of her mouth curved into a mocking smile. She was clearly mocking Yiguchen. Yiguchen shook his head slightly. He had underestimated this scheming childhood sweetheart of his. Xia Yubing, I have to say that you've exceeded my expectations. I can't compare to you in terms of scheming. Yiguchen was very calm amidst the harsh cursing. With Yiguchen's sword demon temperament, there were very few situations that could make him emotional. This bit of cursing was almost negligible to Yiguchen. Yubing doesn't know what you're talking about. However, your attitude and actions have made Yubing's heart extremely cold. Xia Yubing raised her jade-like hands and wiped away her tears. However, there was a trace of mockery in her eyes that only Yiguchen could see. No need to put on an act. Don't you want my life? I'm right here. Let's fight. Yiguchen held his calamity dust sword horizontally. The tip of the sword was suffused with a cold light. Xia Yubing's eyes flashed. The surrounding prodigies seemed to have sensed something. One of them opened his mouth and said, Yiguchen, a despicable person like you actually dares to make a move against Fairy Yubing. We can all cut down a malignant tumor like you. Following this prodigy's roar, a total of 5 prodigies in the surroundings erupted at the same time. True Qi surged out and attacked Yiguchen. In the blink of an eye, the 6 prodigies released their killing moves and attacked Yiguchen. This sudden scene was out of everyone's expectations. However, Yiguchen seemed to have sensed something. He sneered and said, You're still hiding this move? Xia Yubing, you're really meticulous. However, Yiguchen attacked. The Calamity Dust Sword's 42 weapon meridians lit up. At the same time, the Broken Edge Spirit Mark and the Violent Thunder Spirit Mark were activated. In an instant, the Calamity Dust Sword was surrounded by lightning. Cold light filled the sky, as if it could shatter the void. Wind Stab, Yiguchen attacked. Blood light filled the sky and cut the throat of a prodigy. Wen Tu Han, he walked leisurely and waved his sword horizontally. Sword light flashed and cut another prodigy into pieces. Who will drink with me? Yiguchen recited a poem as his sword moved gracefully. A demonic sword pierced through the chest of another prodigy. Who dares to block me? The Calamity Dust Sword vibrated and the sword wave spread out, turning a prodigy in front of him into dust. The sword returns. The person will not return. As Yiguchen's last sentence fell, the true Qi in his body circulated. The Calamity Dust Sword emitted a monstrous blood light. It was as if the Azura Sword God had emerged from hell. God-slaying sword technique, Yellow Springs. The huge blood-colored sword river directly tore apart the bodies of the 2 prodigies in front of him. Blood filled the sky and fell like rain, accompanied by snow. What fell was bright red and dazzling snow. In the rain of blood, the sword demon was not stained by a single drop of blood. At this moment he was the blood hell Azura. At this moment he was the sword demon. The sword returns. The person will not return. The calamity dust sword pointed directly at Xia Yubing. My sword sex Yiguchen does not ask for much. I only want to borrow your life. Chapter 197. The heavens and earth were silent, and the rain of blood was silent. Only Yiguchen, with a sword in his hand, casually killed the 6 geniuses. How heroic was that? Many sword cultivators who were watching the battle were fascinated, and their eyes were filled with fervor. This was the highest realm of sword cultivators. Killing one person in 10 steps, leaving no trace for 1,000 miles. Even if all the geniuses came out, they wouldn't be able to stop the sword in Yiguchen's hand. Where the sword pointed, life and death would be decided. Xia Yubing, let's fight. Yiguchen's cold shout shook the 9 heavens. His feet stepped on the ground, and his true energy exploded. His body leapt up like a swan, and his sword flickered with cold light as it pierced towards Xia Yubing's head. All the grudges were laid down under the sword. Yiguchen, you forced Yubing to this point. You're heartless, so don't blame Yubing for being unjust. Xia Yubing stopped crying. At this moment, her icy blue eyes were incomparably cold, as if she had returned to her previous state of an ice goddess. As long as I can kill you, all obstacles will be swept away. Xia Yubing said coldly in her heart. She took out the glacier sword and slashed out as well. One was the famous sword cultivator genius of the Saint Origin dynasty, the sword master Yiguchen, who had risen again after the fall of his halo. The other was the North River Sword King's inheritance, Xia Yubing, who had appeared out of nowhere as a genius. This duel would attract everyone's attention. Even Yuan Mie, Shinta Miao, and the other geniuses had retreated far away to the edge of the true energy barrier to make space for the two. Because they knew that this was the destined battle between Yiguchen and Xia Yubing. Clang. The calamity dust sword and the glacier sword clashed, and the sound of metal clashing resounded. The surging and sharp sword chi spread out in all directions. It was just a single strike, but the ripples were extremely violent. The spreading sword chi made the scalps of some of the martial artists go numb. 9th cycle of chi refinement. Your realm is inferior to mine. Xia Yubing's sword shook, and she only took half a step back. On the other hand, Yiguchen took 2 steps back. One's cultivation level is not everything. Yiguchen once again charged forward with his sword. His eyes were cold and his moves were also extremely vicious. Futile. Xia Yubing shook her head slightly. Even though Yiguchen had the achievement of killing Qin Aoshi, in her eyes, he was still slightly inferior. She already had a half-step divine soul cultivation and was able to use her soul force. This was also one of Xia Yubing's methods. However, there seemed to be a faint fluctuation spreading out from her icy blue eyes. Yiguchen instantly felt as if there were countless people whispering in his mind, irritating him. This level of influence is useless against me. Yiguchen's pitch-black eyes were instantly swallowed by the color of blood. Eye of Azura, activate. At the same time, Yiguchen used the soul-burning secret technique. An intense burning sensation came from the depths of his soul, causing Yiguchen's face to pale slightly. But as the soul-burning secret technique was used, Yiguchen's Eye of Azura became as dark as blood, causing one's heart to palpitate in fear. This. Even with Xia Yubing's half-step divine soul cultivation, she was instantly stunned. In her mind, she seemed to see herself when she was young. She was all alone, leaning on Yiguchen's back, hiding in the shadows, weak and powerless. This is an illusion technique. Xia Yubing bit her red lips, instantly sobering up. The killing move was already in front of her. God-slaying sword art, blood slaughter. The blood-red Azura power flowed over the tribulation dust sword, scarlet and dazzling. Yiguchen's sword stabbed towards Xia Yubing's chest, not holding back in the slightest. So what if it's an illusion technique? Xia Yubing raised her sword to block, the tip of the tribulation dust sword touching the glacier sword. In the blink of an eye, the Azura power exploded and blood-red sword energy soared into the heavens. Xia Yubing's figure was blasted back. On her flawless face, There was only a tiny wound left behind by the sword energy. A drop of blood slid down her snowy face. The surrounding world was silent. Many martial artists looked at Yi Guqin in a daze. What happened just now? Why was Xia Yubing so absent-minded? Who knows? Could it be some sort of soul illusion technique? But Yi Guqin is only at the 9th revolution of energy refining, so how can he use his soul force? TSK, this Xia Yubing suffered a small loss. Although Yi Guqin's damage to Xia Yubing was minuscule, his cultivation was only at the 9th revolution of energy refining. There was still a large gap between him and a half-step divine soul. To be able to cause such a small amount of damage had already surpassed everyone's expectations. A secret technique? Xia Yubing stretched out a finger, wiping away the drop of blood. God-slaying sword art, demon only. Yi Guqin's figure didn't stop. After using blood slaughter, he once again slashed out with his sword. This sword art, demon only. A fierce and unstoppable sword move rumbled towards Xia Yubing. Xia Yubing's icy true qi gathered. The glacier sword in her hand also emitted an endless cold light. Glacier sword art, heavenly snow-scattering splendor. Cold sword light suddenly spread out. It was as if the sky was filled with flying snow. Every sword light contained a terrifying might that could kill a 5th revolution of energy refining martial artist. Boom! Yi Guqin slashed out with his sword. The blood-colored sword light smashed through the numerous sword lights, heading straight for Xia Yubing. Xia Yubing's expression changed slightly. The might of the god-slaying sword art had exceeded her expectations. However, the situation was still within Xia Yubing's control. She slashed out again. Her entire body was filled with cold air. She had activated a trace of ice sword intent. Combined with the glacier sword art, the might was even more powerful. Glacier sword art, icicle break. Endless cold air gathered in front of Xia Yubing, transforming into an iceberg-like true qi phantom. Boom! Yi Guqin's soul demon sword landed on the ice mountain's shadow with a loud boom. Gotcha! Although it was only formed from true qi, it was like a real iceberg. It actually started to crack. True energy condensation. That's a technique that only true divine soul powerhouses can use. This Xia Yubing only has a half-step divine soul cultivation, so how could she have such a manifestation? Some martial artists were incomparably shocked. However, how could they know that Xia Yubing was only able to do this with the help of a trace of ice sword intent? Retreat. Yi Guqin suddenly felt a sense of danger. The golden true qi in his qi sea surged out, condensing into the phantom of a guardian Vajra on the surface of his body. It was the spiritual rank defensive martial art, Luotian protection. Bang! The illusory iceberg exploded with a loud bang. Immediately after, countless icicles violently surged in all directions. Such a wide-range attack caused the faces of some of the geniuses within the true energy barrier to change drastically. Pucci. Some of the geniuses were affected and had their bodies pierced through by the icicles. This was only the periphery. Yi Guqin, who was in the center of the battlefield, received the most concentrated attacks. Boom, boom, boom. The dense icicles bombarded the phantom of the guardian Vajra, causing ripples to spread out like water. A big killing move? Yi Guqin coldly said as he slashed out with his sword again. His calamity dust sword appeared. His sword moves seemed to depict the trajectory of the Great Thousand World. Countless sword threads spread out, directly shattering the icicles in front of him. Great Thousand Sword Art? Xia Yubing was clearly not unfamiliar with Yi Guqin's sword technique. Her eyes revealed a strange light, and even more so, a deeply hidden hatred. She had once begged Yi Guqin to teach her the myriad sword canon and Great Thousand Sword Art. However, Yi Guqin did not teach her because of his father's warning when he was young. This was also one of the reasons why Xia Yubing had turned dark. This sword art of yours makes Yubing hate it. Xia Yubing's voice was as cold as water. She slashed out with her sword again, the might of her sword aura spreading out in all directions. She wanted to kill Yi Guqin. Chapter 198. Styx River Sword Art, Ice Phoenix Break. Xia Yubing's true qi gathered within her body. Dense ice true chi gathered on the glacier sword. Her weapon veins lit up, and at the same time, the ice spirit marks were activated, causing the already extremely cold sword chi to become even colder. An illusory sword chi ice phoenix wrapped around the glacier sword. Xia Yubing's sword pierced forward like a flying immortal. This was a small special move of a spirit-level sword art. Adding a trace of ice sword intent and the glacier sword support, its power multiplied by several times. At this moment, Xia Yubing's sword appeared. Wherever it passed, the ground would be covered in frost. Yi Guchen shook his blood and Azura force surged, causing the Calamity Dust sword to release an extremely glaring blood-red light. At the same time, the Heavenly Sun profound underworld fire surged out from his body, wrapping around him. It could slightly block the ice chi released by Xia Yubing. God-killing sword art, Yellow Springs. Yi Guchen also slashed out with his sword. True chi surged on the blood-red sword edge. The power of Azura fused with his true chi. It seemed to have transformed into a majestic Yellow Springs river as it rushed towards Xia Yubing. This was a clash of extreme moves, causing everyone to be unable to take their eyes off it. At the same time, their throats became dry. Such a powerful sword move made their scalps go numb. Boom! The blood-red sword light collided with the ice chi, erupting with a deafening explosion. Within the crisscrossing sword chi, Xia Yubing and Yi Guchen engaged in close combat. This pair of Golden Boy and Jade Girl of the Milky Way Prefecture, a couple envied by countless people, were now facing life and death. Only one of them could survive. Clang! A series of sounds of swords colliding rang out. Xia Yubing and Yi Guchen's sword attacks were shockingly fast. The spectating cultivators could only see streaks of afterimages, unable to see their movements clearly. These two are both terrifying. Even some sword cultivators who had been immersed in the way of the sword for a long time sighed at their own inferiority. Bang! Yi Guchen slashed out with his sword. Xia Yubing blocked it with her sword. However, he instead used wave-like subtle steps. As his figure flashed, he extended his other hand. True chi surged, and he pointed towards Xia Yubing. Not good. Xia Yubing's expression suddenly changed. She sensed a type of danger. 6 Pulses Godly Sword. The true chi in Yi Guchen's chi followed the tendons and veins in his arm and gathered in his palm. In the end, it gushed out from his fingertips and transformed into streaks of sharp sword chi, shooting explosively towards Xia Yubing's head. Mystic Ice Finger. Xia Yubing also used her finger martial arts. Streams of icy sword aura gushed out and collided with the 6-pulse divine sword aura. True chi exploded. Yi Guchen used wave-like subtle steps again, using his sword techniques to entangle Xia Yubing while releasing the 6-pulse divine sword. That sword master is really something. He can actually split his attention to use finger techniques while using sword techniques? Some of the warriors were stunned. Even the people from the 7 great factions were a little shocked. It was extremely rare to see such a multitasking method. Looks like you also have some tricks up your sleeve. Xia Yubing's expression became serious. Whether it was the 6-pulse divine sword or wave-like subtle steps, they were both top-tier martial arts. Xia Yubing had never seen them before. Thus, she became a little more vigilant towards Yi Guchen. Following Yi Guchen's multitasking technique, everyone was somewhat shocked to discover that Xia Yubing actually faintly showed signs of being suppressed. Seeing that victory seemed to be tilting towards Yi Guchen, Su Jianshi couldn't help but shout, "Silly boy, you can do it." It's not that simple. Xia Yubing is only probing. The two of them are trying to figure out each other's trump cards, said by Yanji as he gently fanned himself. Just when everyone thought that Xia Yubing had temporarily fallen into a disadvantageous position, she made her move again. Her lotus feet moved, and her speed increased by several times. This is a movement martial art? Seeing Xia Yubing's speed increase, Yi Guchen faintly frowned. The corner of Xia Yubing's mouth rose into a sneer. The traceless snow steps she used was the inheritance of the North River Sword King. It was a high-grade spiritual tier movement martial art, and its speed was unpredictable. So what if you're fast? Yi Guchen's blood-red eyes were like scarlet moons. His Azura words could slow down his opponent's speed. At the same time, Yiguchen once again used the soul ignition secret technique, and illusions appeared in Xia Yubing's mind. Illusions? Yubing won't fall for it again. Xia Yubing also released her soul power to resist Yiguchen's attack. Abyss River Sword Art, Sacred Ice Phoenix Image. Xia Yubing let out a delicate shout as she held her sword with both hands. Intense ice-cold true qi gushed out, and vaguely, it condensed into an ice phoenix divine statue. The terrifying fluctuations emitted from it caused the corners of the eyes of the heaven prides who had retreated far away to twitch slightly. Go! Xia Yubing unsheathed her sword. A terrifying frost sword aura accompanied the ice phoenix statue's image as it rushed towards Yiguchen. This was the ultimate move of a spiritual tier sword art. It was terrifyingly powerful. One had to know that Su Jianshir's spiritual tier sword art's ultimate move had forced back 3 sky prides of the same level. But now, Xia Yubing's cultivation was clearly higher than Su Jianshir's. Adding on the ice sword intent and frost true energy, this ultimate move's power was boundless. Yiguchen took a deep breath in the face of this sword that made everyone tremble in fear. He unsheathed his tribulation dust sword and drew a circle. At the same time, he faintly added a trace of hard and soft sword intent. This extreme circle seemed to be able to contain and swallow all things. It was the Taiji sword art. Can Yi Guchen block this move? I feel like this move from the sword sect isn't that strong. The cultivators on the outside discussed. Compared to Xia Yubing's powerful sword move, Yi Guchen's sword move was silent and didn't fluctuate much. But it was this sword move that made Feng Manlu, Shen Tai, and the other peak experts frown. This sword technique is interesting. I've never heard of it before. Although Feng Manlu was blind, his soul perception was sharp. Moreover, he had immersed himself in the sword Dao for many years, so he could naturally sense the flow of sword aura. Seeing Yi Guchen's simple sword move, Xia Yubing didn't relax in the slightest. Boom! The Ice Phoenix sacred image fiercely collided with Yi Guchen's sword. The frost sword aura instantly spread out, causing Yi Guchen's hands to stiffen. The web between his thumb and index finger was torn by the violent force, causing blood to flow out. Puchi! Yi Guchen spat out a mouthful of blood as he retreated several steps. He couldn't stop himself at all. The sword sect is about to lose. Some people exclaimed. Yi Guchen retreated several dozen steps, coughing blood from the corner of his mouth. But his gaze was sharp, his expression serious, and his Dantian's sea of qi started to circulate. Yi Guchen stomped the ground fiercely. With a boom, Yi Guchen's retreating figure suddenly stopped. His feet sank deeply into the ground, but he still managed to receive this move. Xia Yubing raised her eyebrows. Yi Guchen's performance exceeded her expectations. Xia Yubing, I'll return all of your sword moves to you. Although there was blood at the corner of Yi Guchen's mouth, he wasn't dispirited at all. The Taiji sword technique was about borrowing force to fight force. As long as one could receive this sword move, they would be able to reflect it. Go! Yi Guchen swung his sword with all his strength. The terrifying sword move that had been swallowed by the Taiji sword technique actually spread out again, rushing towards Xia Yubing. Such an unforeseen event caused Xia Yubing to be momentarily stunned. She circulated the true energy in her body and hurriedly blocked with her sword. Bang! Xia Yubing's figure was blasted back, a faint trace of blood flowing from the corner of her mouth. All of the spectating fighters felt their hearts rise. This battle was simply impossible to take their eyes off. Just a moment ago, Yi Guchen was still coughing up blood, and in the blink of an eye, Xia Yubing was injured again. This is truly a fierce battle between dragons and tigers. Exciting! Someone from the 7 great powers clicked his tongue and sighed. Yi Guchen, you have indeed exceeded Yubing's expectations. However, the outcome will not change. Xia Yubing slowly raised her hand, and dark blue formation patterns appeared. As Xia Yubing pressed her hand down, the formation patterns extended along the ground covered in frost and snow. That is, Yi Guchen's pupils constricted. Heavenly frost flowing snow sword formation. Xia Yubing shouted clearly, and the light of the formation patterns surged. The wind and snow in the surroundings seemed to have been summoned, transforming into thousands of flying swords of ice and snow, shooting towards Yi Guqin in unison. This was Xia Yubing's hidden killing move. Chapter 199. The runes of the sword array spread. Accompanied by a sky full of snow, tens of thousands of sparkling and translucent flying swords shot towards Yi Guqin. This was a true attack of tens of thousands of swords. Mid-grade mortal-grade sword array. Feeling the power of this sword array, Yi Guqin's expression changed slightly. This heavenly frost-flowing snow sword array was even stronger than the little Ashura sword array he had used before. This was a sword array that could threaten even divine soul experts. Yi Guqin also had a sword array. It was the 6 Paths Ashura sword array he had obtained in the 18 Blood Prison. However, the 6 Paths Ashura sword array's level was too high. It was an Earth-grade sword array that could threaten Divine Palace and Celestial Palace experts. It was not something Yi Guqin could activate right now. Xia Yubing is only at the half-step Divine Soul realm. If she wants to activate this mid-grade mortal-grade sword array, she won't be able to last for long. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed as he thought of a countermeasure. Oh, is delaying tactics of any use? Since Yubing has activated her sword array, she can naturally kill you. As if she had seen through Yi Guqin's strategy, Xia Yubing's lips curved up in a cold smile. She raised her jade hand and the sparkling and translucent flying swords that filled the sky flew with her hand. Then, they surrounded Yi Guqin from all directions. Yi Guqin displayed his Taiji sword art. His sword drew a circle, as if it wanted to completely destroy these flying swords. However, Vihuchi, a sparkling and translucent flying sword cut through Yi Guqin's arm, leaving behind a bloody wound. Another flying sword cut through Yi Guqin's cheek, leaving behind a trail of blood. Although these sparkling and translucent flying swords were not real and were condensed from ice true qi, their power could not be underestimated. Moreover, the flying swords came from all directions. The Taiji sword art could not completely defend against them. It's over. I didn't expect Xia Yubing to have a mid-grade mortal-grade sword array. This is a sword array that can deal with divine soul experts. Yi Guqin is in danger. Some martial artists who maintained a neutral attitude shook their heads. She's actually capable of activating a mid-tier soul-tier sword formation. This Xia Yubing has concealed her strength quite deeply. Some of the higher-ups of the 7 great powers sighed. Foolish kid. Su Jianshir's eyes were filled with worry as she clenched her fists in front of her chest. Trust in young Master Yi, Zither Fairy consoled. However, even they sighed. Even Yuan Mie, Shinta Miao, and the others would not feel good if they were trapped in such a sword formation. Yi Guqin, you can just die inside. Murong Ditian's gaze was filled with bone-deep hatred and was extremely cold. Yi Guqin was trapped in the center of the sword formation, and the flying swords that filled the sky shot toward him like rain. Even with the Taiji swordsmanship, Yi Guqin was still injured in many places. Yi Guqin, it's over, said Xiaoyu coldly as she watched Yi Guqin being tossed around by the thousands of ice swords. Oh, is that so? Yi Guqin's figure suddenly stopped as he slowly raised one of his hands, as if he was about to execute some kind of ultimate move. What other moves do you have? Xia Yubing's gaze focused. Maintaining the heavenly frost-flowing snow sword formation consumed a lot of her energy, so she had to kill Yi Guqin in the shortest amount of time possible. However, facing the ice swords that filled the sky, Yi Guqin had instead stopped dodging. Heaven-splitting sword soul, come out. Yi Guqin circulated the true energy within his body. Shortly after, a green sword soul surged out from his body like a torrent. It was as if a green river had rushed out from his body. The surging sword chi shook the surroundings. With Yi Guqin's current cultivation, he could activate 5,000 heaven-splitting sword souls at full power. The more heaven-splitting sword souls there were, the more powerful they would be. The powerful heaven-splitting sword soul scattered in all directions, as if it could cut through the void. The ice swords that filled the sky and fell towards Yi Guqin all collided with the heaven-splitting sword souls, causing rumbling sounds to erupt. However, with the heaven-splitting sword souls, the heavenly frost-flowing snow sword formation was actually unable to obstruct Yi Guqin at all. What kind of move is this? Some warriors were dumbfounded. Especially some sword cultivators, they had no idea what the sword chi that came out of Yi Guchen's body was. This is... Feng Manlu of the Sword Sect's Forest of Pagodas frowned slightly. When Yi Guchen took out 5,000 heaven-splitting sword souls, Xia Yubing's expression also changed slightly. Maintaining the heavenly frost-flowing snow sword formation required a lot of true energy and soul power. However, Yi Guchen's heaven-splitting sword souls only consumed true energy. With Yi Guchen's 1,000 feet long energy sea, he could completely support the consumption. This is a little troublesome. Xia Yubing's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. Only now did she truly look at Yi Guchen seriously. This Yi Guchen, who was crippled by Gu Xiaoyang and rose again, made Xia Yubing feel that she was out of control for the first time. She held her sword and attacked, the tip of her sword filled with cold air. As the ice swords that filled the sky and the heaven-splitting sword souls collided, Xia Yubing and Yi Guchen once again fought. The swords intersected, dazzling the eyes. Outsiders were unable to catch the speed of their swords. When Xia Yubing attacked with her sword, snowflakes and frost splashed out. Xia family's frost sword arts. You actually know how to use Xiantian sword arts? Yi Guchen was astonished. Xia Yubing smiled coldly. The glacier sword vibrated and an extremely cold sword chi soared into the sky. The surrounding land was covered in white frost. This was the frost sword art's ultimate move. Are you trying to show off to me? You want to humiliate me with your Xiantian sword arts? Yi Guchen thought to himself. At the same time, his gaze was extremely sharp. He also attacked with his sword. The sword shadow was as fast as daylight. Aura Fast Sword's ultimate move, Waning Rainbow. With Yi Guchen's current strength and comprehension, he could easily comprehend the Xiantian sword art's ultimate move. You actually have the face to use my Xia family's sword arts? Xia Yubing coldly scolded. The two ultimate moves collided. The frost sword arts exploded with an extremely cold air, while the Aurora Fast Sword was unbreakable. It directly broke through the tip of the glacier sword. In front of Xia Yubing, a white jade-like tortoise shell appeared. There were spirit patterns engraved on it. As the spirit patterns blossomed with divine light, the tortoise shell suddenly expanded. It was like a white jade shield, blocking Yi Guchen's sword. The sound of metal clashing resounded. Spirit pattern defensive divine weapon? Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows. At the same time, the power of ice and fire surged around his body. The ice and fire dragon crystal armor instantly covered his body. Bang! The two retreated at the same time. Yi Guchen's face slightly paled. Although he had the ice and fire dragon crystal armor protecting his body, he was still injured by the recoil. Xia Yubing also retreated continuously. The white tortoise shell was also hit by the recoil and crashed towards her. Looking at the battle that had almost sunk into a state of panic, many spectators held their breaths. They didn't dare to breathe loudly. Yi Guchen looked at the unfathomable Xia Yubing opposite him and sighed inwardly. He had to admit that Xia Yubing was indeed an opponent that couldn't be underestimated. The origin ring on his finger flashed, and the meteor soft sword also appeared. And Yi Guchen actually took out another sword. What is he going to do? Some people were puzzled. Could it be a two-handed sword? But I've never seen Yi Guchen use it before. Moreover, if it's a two-handed sword, one of his hands must be slightly unfamiliar with it. Looking at Yi Guchen holding a sword with both hands, some sword cultivators shook their heads. Although a two-handed sword was twice as powerful as a one-handed sword, it was easy to control. If the two hands were not coordinated well, it might even have the opposite effect. They had never seen Yi Guchen use a two-handed sword, so they didn't think much of it. Do you think you can defeat Yubing just because you have an extra sword? Looking at Yi Guchen, who was holding a sword with both hands, Xia Yubing couldn't help but find it funny. We'll know once we try. Yi Guchen's expression was cold and solemn. He didn't say anything else, and used both hands to attack at the same time. His left hand used the Boundless Heaven Sword Art's minor skill, Boundless Wheel. His right hand used the God-slaying sword art, Solitary Demon. It was the dual sword divergence move. Two extreme moves were used at the same time. Sword Qi rushed to the 9 heavens. At this moment, everyone's expression changed drastically. Chapter 200. Yi Guqin rarely displayed his dual sword technique in front of others. Therefore, when he unleashed this move, it caused many onlookers to be incomparably stunned. Especially some sword cultivators, their eyes were filled with shock. Only sword cultivators understood how much effort was needed to wield the sword with both hands, and it also required a long period of cultivation. However, using both hands like this could only allow a sword cultivator to wield the sword with both hands at most. It was the first time they had seen someone like Yi Guqin, who could perform a spirit-level sword technique with both swords. This completely overturned their understanding. Boom! Yi Guqin's figure was like a lonely swan as he charged towards Xia Yubing with the power of both swords. This sword technique was equivalent to doubling the power of both swords. Xia Yubing also revealed an extremely surprised expression. She had some understanding of Yi Guqin. After all, they were childhood sweethearts. However, she had never seen Yi Guqin practice dual swords. Even if he had extraordinary talent, if he had never cultivated it before, it would be difficult for him to perform a dual sword technique. When did Yi Guqin learn dual swords? Xia Yubing bit her red lips. At this critical moment, she could only take out the white tortoise shell again, turning it into a white shield to block Yi Guqin's sword technique. However, Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows. The Calamity Dust Sword and Meteor Soft Sword's weapon veins were lit up, their power overlapping. At the same time, golden light veins snaked out from his body, sparkling and translucent. It's the sword vein. Some cultivators exclaimed when they saw this. Previously, Yi Guqin was able to obtain the title of Swordmaster because he had two ultimate moves. The first was naturally his innate ability, the innate sword embryo. The second was the sword vein that could increase the power of sword qi. After that, in the Sword King's secret realm, Yi Guqin's sword vein was destroyed by Gu Xiaoyang. But now, Yi Guqin had cultivated the sword vein to perfection. 360 sword rays emitted resplendent golden light, making Yi Guqin look like a god descending. With the amplification of the perfect sword vein, the power of Yi Guqin's dual sword unique skill was stacked again, reaching a terrifying level. The earth split apart with Yi Guqin's sword move. The void exploded and let out a sharp howl. Boom! Yi Guqin's attack landed heavily on the white tortoise shell. The spirit inscriptions on the white tortoise shell emitted the strongest light as it tried its best to defend against this attack. However, the power of Yi Guqin's killing blow was extremely terrifying. Sword qi filled the sky and surged wildly in all directions. It was impossible to block it completely. Bang! The white tortoise shell was blasted back, ruthlessly smashing into Xia Yubing's delicate body. Xia Yubing's face paled. She actually spat out a mouthful of blood, and her figure continuously retreated. Again! Yi Guqin had a wealth of combat experience, so how could he miss this opportunity? On his Calamity Dust Sword, the power of Azura condensed like blood as he slashed out once again. God-slaying sword technique, Yellow Springs. At the same time, he brandished his Meteorite Soft Sword. The sword light was like a wild python, snaking out and tearing the air apart. The ultimate move of the Golden Snake swordsmanship, Mysterious Sword Light Snake. Bang! Bang! Xia Yubing's figure retreated again. Even the white tortoise shell was sent flying to the side. Yi Guqin's eyes flickered like the cold stars in the sky, extremely sharp and fierce. His Calamity Dust Sword pierced towards Xia Yubing's chest. Xia Yubing clenched her teeth and used traceless snow steps. In this short period of time, Yi Guqin actually didn't give Xia Yubing any chance to counterattack. This kind of fighting method made Xia Yubing's heart heavy. Puchi. Finally, Xia Yubing's movement allowed her to dodge Yi Guqin's sword attack. The Calamity Dust Sword brushed past her shoulder. Following the sound of cloth tearing, her snow-white shoulders split open. Blood flowed out from the graze. Yi Guqin flipped his hand, wanting to attack again, but he suddenly felt an extreme danger. Retreat! The vigilance in his heart made Yi Guqin's feet touch the ground, and his figure abruptly retreated. It was also at this moment that an ice sword suddenly burst out from the ground, brushing past Yiguchen's body. It was only half a finger's distance away from his face. What a scheme! Yiguchen's footsteps stopped, looking at the young girl who was holding her shoulder not far away. At this moment, a tidal wave of uproar resounded in the surroundings. Even some of the people from the 7 great powers opened their eyes wide. They were extremely shocked by the situation before their eyes. Xia Yubing was actually suppressed by Yiguchen? Xia Yubing can't be blamed. Yiguchen's fighting experience is simply terrifying. And that two-handed sword, he can actually use a spirit-grade sword technique's ultimate move at the same time. This is simply unheard of. A few people exclaimed, but there were also some people who supported Xia Yubing. They sneered, "What's the rush? Lady Xia hasn't taken out her trump card yet. Have you all forgotten what the greatest opportunity she obtained in the North River Sword King's cave was?" Hearing these words, the crowd nodded their heads in understanding. Although it seemed like Xia Yubing was being suppressed and was at a disadvantage, she still hadn't completely used her trump card. "Yiguchen, you're indeed mysterious. Yubing has never seen you use such a technique before." Although a bloody wound had appeared on her snow-white shoulder, Xia Yubing didn't care about it. She stared at Yiguchen with cold eyes. "There's no point in saying more. Xia Yubing, I know what your trump card is. So use it, or else you won't have another chance." Yiguchen's two-handed sword vibrated as he spoke with a cold tone. "Since Yiguchen is in such a hurry to die, then Yubing will fulfill your wish." Although Xia Yubing's blue robe was dyed with blood, when she calmly took a step forward, a sword intent that caused everyone's expression to change drastically swept out in all directions like a blizzard. Ice sword intent. Xia Yubing took a step forward, and frost spread out from the ground beneath her feet. She didn't really use it, but the aura she emitted caused everyone's heart to tremble. Sword intent was a technique that only 1 in 10,000 sword cultivators could comprehend. In the entire Saint Origin dynasty, there were millions of sword cultivators, but those who could comprehend sword intent might not even be 1 in a million. For example, in this elite gathering, only Xia Yubing and Yuan Mie had comprehended sword intent. Including Yiguchen, there were only 3 people. Even Murong Ditian, a genius of the sword Dao, hadn't comprehended sword intent. One could imagine how rare it was for geniuses to comprehend sword intent. With this sword intent, Xia Yubing is in an undefeatable position. Xian Tai spoke. He was optimistic about Xia Yubing. Not only him, but the majority of the spectators were also shocked by Xia Yubing's sword intent. Their gazes were filled with envy. Su Jianshi and the others' hearts also clenched. They were worried for Yiguchen. This ice sword intent isn't something you personally comprehended. It's something you inherited from the North River Sword King. Therefore, you've never understood what sword intent is. Yiguchen slightly shook his head and spoke in a low voice. Once these words were spoken, many people frowned. They felt that Yiguchen seemed to be saying sour grapes because he couldn't eat them. This Yiguchen merely didn't obtain the North River Sword King's inheritance. If the inheritance was placed in front of him, I don't believe that he wouldn't comprehend it. Lu Tianying sneered. Clearly, he was disdainful of Yiguchen's words. However, Xia Yubing didn't reveal a mocking smile. Because she knew that Yiguchen possessed sword intent. "I've already shown my trump card. Let's fight." Yiguchen's eyes flashed. His black hair fluttered in the wind. At this moment, he was like a sword god awakening. The meteor-flexible sword buzzed and trembled. A similarly profound aura spread out and permeated the surrounding void. This aura is... The eyes of the upper echelons of the 7 major factions shrunk as they stared at Yiguchen. Many sword cultivators were also stunned. Sensing that terrifying aura, some of their hands even began to tremble. This is sword intent. Chapter 201. Yiguchen's soft meteorite sword seemed to have turned into a spiritual snake. At the same time, a mysterious sword intent spread out. It was the hard and soft sword intent. Seeing Yiguchen display sword intent, Xia Yubing frowned slightly, but she wasn't too surprised. After all, in the previous battle, Xia Yubing already knew that Yi Guqin possessed the hard and soft sword intent. However, the several tens of thousands of spectators, as well as the people from the 7 major forces, were all somewhat dumbfounded. Sword intent wasn't a martial art that could be obtained through diligent cultivation. Talent, opportunity, and luck were all indispensable. It was precisely because sword intent was difficult to comprehend that sword cultivators with sword intent were so rare. However, at this moment, the people who were originally mocking Yi Guqin for being sour grapes all seemed to be mute as they stared blankly at Yi Guqin. Even those who weren't sword cultivators could feel the ripples of sword intent. As for Lu Tianying, the sneer on his face didn't completely disappear. At this moment, it was frozen in place, appearing rather comical. Young Master Yi is truly unfathomable. Zither Fairy, by Yenji, and the others were also somewhat speechless. After all, Yi Guqin brought them wave after wave of shock. Originally, everyone thought highly of Xia Yubing, who possessed the ice sword intent, but now that Yi Guqin had also displayed his sword intent, the entire battle became complicated and confusing again. So what if you've comprehended sword intent? Yubing has already comprehended the ice sword intent to the highest level. A cold light seemed to flash in Xia Yubing's ice-blue eyes. She once again displayed the traceless snow steps while holding the glacier sword. She swung her sword horizontally, still using the ultimate move of the Styx River sword art, the Ice Phoenix sacred image, but the power was incomparable. Because this time, Xia Yubing didn't use a trace of the ice sword intent, but completely unleashed it. Clang. The Ice Phoenix divine statue formed by the endless ice sword aura was truly like an ancient phoenix descending into the world. It carried a terrifying power as it violently rushed towards Yi Guqin. Wherever it passed, frost filled the sky and the earth froze. Hardness and gentleness, myriad demonic sword shadows. Yi Guqin swung his meteorite flexible sword horizontally. His tool meridian lit up, and at the same time, he activated the phantom, gathering, and light spiritual runes, causing the power of the sword move to become even more powerful and unpredictable. In an instant, countless sword lights like a swarm of snakes leaving their nest, covering the sky and the earth as they rushed towards Yubing. At the same time, everyone was shocked to see that those sword lights were not in a straight line. Instead, they were wriggling like snakes. They came from all directions and from all angles. They attacked fiercely. Clang, clang, clang. Countless sword lights fell on the Ice Phoenix sacred shadow, bursting forth with continuous sounds of collision. However, the Ice Phoenix landed on Yi Guqin's body as if it was a dead tree. The dragon was the Ice, the Ice dragon crystal armor, defensive spiritual runruns defensive. Bangzes, however, even so, Yi Guqin was forced to retreat again, coughing out large mouthfuls of blood. That extremely powerful ice sword aura had even spread into his body, causing it to become somewhat stiff. Xia Yubing obviously wouldn't let go of this opportunity. Her lotus feet moved, and she directly attacked with her sword. At this moment, she was like a fierce sword fairy. Each and every one of her attacks was fatal. With the addition of the ice sword intent, the power of Xia Yubing's ice attribute sword techniques was multiplied. The glacier sword pierced through Yi Guqin's shoulder. Xia Yubing's mouth curled into a cold smile, and she directly activated her ice true energy, which entered Yi Guqin's body through the glacier sword, wanting to freeze his life force. The heavenly sun profound underworld fire surged out from Yi Guqin's body, enveloping Yi Guqin and dispelling the coldness in his body. His other hand held the sword and swept towards Xia Yubing's chest. Xia Yubing raised her hand, and ice true energy condensed into an ice sword in the air, blocking Yi Guqin's sword. You won't be able to comprehend the pinnacle of sword intent. Xia Yubing seemed to have victory in her grasp, and her glacier sword shook. With a boom, Yi Guqin's figure was sent flying. His entire shoulder was dripping with blood, but it was instantly frozen by the ice true energy, forming a blood ice cube. Be careful! Su Jianshir's heart fiercely clenched when she saw Yi Guqin injured. It seems that Xia Yubing's sword intent is a level higher. The North River Sword King is an expert of the divine dwelling stage, so his inheritance is naturally complete. Xia Yubing's comprehension of sword intent has almost reached the pinnacle. Although Yi Guchen also has sword intent, how can he be Xia Yubing's opponent? As Yi Guchen's situation deteriorated, several cultivators began to discuss. Yi Guchen, let's end this battle. Xia Yubing held her sword horizontally, and the icy qi from the tip of her sword seemed to be able to freeze the air. Snow drifted down from the sky. Xia Yubing was like a fairy in the snow, but what she brought was death. Hard and soft sword intent, is it that simple? Yi Guchen's qi and blood rumbled as they circulated, gathering at his injured shoulder. The wound there quickly began to heal. This was the benefit of a perfect body. In the face of Xia Yubing's fierce sword, Yi Guchen's meteoric soft sword struck out again, and a mysterious hard and soft sword intent filled the surroundings. Xia Yubing was somewhat surprised to find that her fierce sword moves seemed to have been imperceptibly weakened when she approached Yi Guchen. Soft sword. Yi Guchen's meteoric soft sword collided with Xia Yubing's glacier sword. There wasn't an intense collision because the fierce sword qi was completely guided by the meteoric soft sword. At this moment, the meteoric soft sword was like a spirit snake, soft and flexible. Hard sword. Yi Guchen's eyes were extremely sharp. In his other hand, the Calamity Dust Sword struck out again, activating the Edge Breaker and Thunder Spirit patterns. Adding on the support of the hard and soft sword intent, it seemed to have a sharpness that could shatter space. Xia Yubing's expression changed, and she took out the white tortoise shell again. With the support of the Edge Breaker and hard sword, the Calamity Dust Sword struck the white tortoise shell, and actually pierced it by an inch. Immediately after, small cracks began to spread. Xia Yubing's expression changed. Once cracks appeared on the defensive spirit artifact, its defensive power would plummet. Bang! Yi Guchen stepped out, sending the cracked white tortoise shell flying, while Xia Yubing's figure quickly retreated. Yi Guchen seized the opportunity, and the Calamity Dust Sword in his hand struck out. His figure seemed to have pulled out an afterimage, and an extremely sharp sword light burst out with a loud bang. Shadow Kill Sword Art, Vanishing Shadow. Clang. Xia Yubing held her sword horizontally, and felt an extremely sharp sword qi coming from her sword. This sword art is... Xia Yubing's eyes revealed shock. The moment Yi Guchen displayed the shadow kill swordsmanship, the gray-robed man, who had been standing at the edge of the area and watching the battle, suddenly trembled. As if she had been struck by lightning, her mind went blank, and only Yi Guchen's familiar yet strange sword was left. Impossible. I must have seen wrongly. The gray-robed person muttered in a low voice, her voice trembling. Her mind seemed to have been struck by 100,000 lightning bolts, and her jade-like hands were tightly clenched. Her thin fingernails pierced into her white palm, and blood dripped from between her fingers. But as if the heavens were playing a joke on her, Yi Guchen struck out again, and it was also the shadow kill sword art. That familiar sword path was like a nightmare. Every night, it would play countless times in the gray-robed person's mind. Every time she dreamed of it, her heart would bleed. Impossible. The gray-robed person bit her lips until they bled. Only a remnant of her will was supporting her, preventing her from fainting. I want to ask him myself. The gray-robed person's face was as white as paper. Chapter 202. On the stage, Yi Guchen used a spirit-grade sword art, the Shadow Assassination Sword Art. The Shadow Assassination Sword Art was not only a sword art, but also a combination of movement techniques. Yi Guchen used the shadow steps, and his figure left behind a series of afterimages. Ordinary martial artists could not catch Yi Guchen's movements at all. This is the sword art of the Bloodthirst Tower. Although Xia Yubing had not joined the Bloodthirst Tower, she had heard of some of their sword arts. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed. He did not plan to hide anything. Although no assassin from the Bloodthirst Tower had ever participated in an elite meeting, Yi Guchen did not care. He had already obtained the Azura sword intent, so he did not mind exposing his identity. Not only Xia Yubing, but even some of the surrounding martial artists, including the geniuses, narrowed their eyes. They felt that this assassination sword art was very similar to the sword arts of the Bloodthirst Tower. However, they did not dare to be certain. Many of them had only heard of the Bloodthirst Tower's sword art and had never seen it with their own eyes. At this moment, Yiguchen pushed the Shadow Assassination Sword art to the extreme. The sword edge tore through the air, piercing toward Xia Yubing's face. Xia Yubing blocked with her sword, but she could feel the craftiness of Yiguchen's sword art. This made Xia Yubing unable to capture Yiguchen's figure with her sword in tent of ice. With a loud clang, the sword edges collided, creating a burst of sparks. Yiguchen's figure retreated again. Then, 1,000 feet of qi brewed in his body. With a stomp of his foot, his speed increased several times. The black robe stuck to his body because of the wind pressure. The Shadow Assassination Sword art's ultimate move, instant kill. In almost half a breath's time, Yiguchen's figure appeared as if he had teleported, arriving less than one zhang in front of Xia Yubing. The Shadow Assassination Sword art was a spirit-grade middle-grade sword art. Its ultimate move was naturally powerful. Even Xia Yubing's pupils trembled. She was shocked by Yiguchen's speed. Seeing Yiguchen's life-reaping swordage coming, Xia Yubing also attacked. The glacier sword, accompanied by a monstrous chill, suddenly stabbed out. However, the expected sound of metal colliding did not appear when he pierced the sword. Xia Yubing's sword actually directly passed through Yiguchen's body. Everyone at the scene was dumbfounded, revealing a look of astonishment. When her sword landed on Yiguchen's body, it was as if it had landed on empty air. There was no sound at all, not even a drop of blood. This is the Bloodthirsty Tower's sword technique. Suddenly, a life and death chamber expert watching the battle spoke. He had once escaped from a blood-listening tower's golden-masked assassin. And the swordsmanship used by the gold-masked assassin was exactly the same as the one used by Yiguchen. Bloodthirst Tower. Didn't they say that the Bloodthirst Tower's sword techniques are not allowed to be passed on to outsiders? How did Yiguchen obtain the Bloodthirst Tower's sword techniques? There are only a few famous geniuses in the Bloodthirst Tower. The most famous one in recent times is a genius named Sword Demon. A warrior murmured, and then his face suddenly froze. For a moment, a thought flashed through everyone's mind. At the same time, a wisp of astonishment climbed onto their faces. Sword Sect, Sword Demon, could it be? Many warriors glanced at each other. The shock in their hearts could no longer be described with words. Not only had Yiguchen transformed into Dugubai, but he had also once been Bloodthirst Tower's Sword Demon. This conclusion was like a bomb falling into the sea, setting off monstrous waves. Just Duguwubai's identity alone was enough to shock everyone. Now, they had come to the conclusion that Sword Sect was Sword Demon. Although Sword Demon's reputation was not as resounding as Duguwubai's, he was still a peerless assassin whose name was known throughout the Bloodthirst Tower. Brother Yi, how many more secrets do you have that you haven't revealed? Chu Qingqi was already beyond shocked, unable to say anything. The hearts of the people from the 7 major factions had even become somewhat numb. Yiguchen's endless identities and methods were like an iron hammer, heavily smashing everyone's hearts again and again. However, only the gray-robed man's body trembled even more violently amidst this shocking uproar, as if he was enduring something. In the field, when Xia Yubing pierced through Yiguchen's body like air, an extreme sense of danger suddenly surged in her heart. Boom! Without the slightest hesitation, Xia Yubing pushed her ice sword intent to the extreme. A sword chi that seemed to be able to freeze people's minds spread out from her body. The sound of something freezing could be heard. It was the ice sword chi that had blocked the attack of a sword. At this moment, Yiguchen's figure was shockingly behind Xia Yubing. His Calamity Dust sword was no more than 3 inches away from the back of Xia Yubing's head. Yiguchen's wrist shook, urging the heavenly sun profound underworld fire. At the same time, sword chi exploded, wanting to pierce through Xia Yubing's head. Xia Yubing's head suddenly tilted. With a bang, the Calamity Dust sword pierced through the ice sword chi, brushing past the side of Xia Yubing's head, cutting off a few strands of ice blue hair that fluttered in the wind. What a pity! Yiguchen sighed inwardly. The ultimate killing move of the Shadow Assassination Sword art was not only powerful, but also an extreme assassination move. It was able to create an afterimage to confuse the enemy at the same time as the sword strike, and then quietly circle behind the enemy to deliver a fatal blow. However, Xia Yubing's cultivation was powerful, and she was alert. Her ice sword intent exploded, causing Yi Guqin's sword to miss. If such an assassination sword technique did not succeed the first time, it would be very difficult to confuse Xia Yubing a second time. Yi Guqin, you've really angered Yubing. Xia Yubing's beautiful eyes were extremely cold. Just now, if not for her quick mind and her ice sword intent, she might have really been pierced through by Yi Guqin's sword. That kind of life and death crisis made Xia Yubing's heart surge with anger. In her eyes, Yi Guqin, who was destined to be stepped on by her, had actually threatened her life. Xia Yubing could not accept this. Xia Yubing, what is your trump card? Show it. Yi Guqin coldly stared at Xia Yubing. Although Xia Yubing had already activated her ice sword intent, Yi Guqin still felt that Xia Yubing seemed to be hiding something. Xia Yubing's shrewdness made Yi Guqin have no choice but to be cautious. What? Could it be that Xia Yubing still has a trump card that she hasn't used yet? Many people were shocked when they heard Yi Guqin's words. In their eyes, Xia Yubing, who had completely activated her ice sword intent, was already extremely powerful. Could it be that she still had not used her full strength? Xia Yubing laughed. Her laughter carried disdain. She looked at Yi Guqin and said with a deep gaze, Yi Guqin, you have indeed exceeded Yubing's expectations. Yubing actually also knows that you should still be hiding something. However, it doesn't matter. Next, no matter what trump card you use, even if it's the hard and soft sword intent, you will not be able to contend against me. Xia Yubing's words carried extreme confidence, as if victory was already in her hands. Yi Guqin waited with rapt attention. This is what Yubing obtained when she entered the Sword King Mystery Realm for the second time. Xia Yubing flipped her hand and put away the glacier sword. Then she took out another sword. The moment this sword appeared, its aura was astonishing. The coldness it emitted caused everyone to tremble. This is a divine weapon with mystical patterns. Someone cried out in disbelief. Chapter 203. Mystical rune divine weapons were rarer and more powerful than spirit rune divine weapons. Spirit runes resonated with each other, forming a formation to amplify the weapon's power. Of course, mystical rune divine weapons were not something that could be forged by ordinary blacksmiths. At the very least, only blacksmiths above 5 stars had the ability to forge them. Moreover, the success rate was not high. The mystical rune divine weapon that Xia Yubing took out was dark blue in color. The sword's body was winding like a dragon's body, emitting a deep, chilling intent. The sword's hilt seemed to be lined with dragon scales. Along with the infusion of true qi, many spirit runes appeared on the sword's body, faintly emitting a frightening aura. This frost horn dragon sword was the sword that North River Sword King Chu Donglu used when he became a Sword King. Using it to kill you is like using a butcher's knife to kill a chicken. Xia Yubing shook her head slightly, seemingly disdainful. Chu Donglio's Sword King divine weapon. Many people stared at it in shock. How powerful was the sword of a Sword King? Xia Yubing's glacier sword was merely the sword that Chu Donglu used when he was young. Only when Xia Yubing entered the Sword King's secret realm for the second time did she have the ability to unseal this mystical rune divine weapon. Prince Yuani relied on the heavenly sacred 5 elements wheel to become a prodigy. When Murong Ditian took out the Mara sword, his battle prowess multiplied. And now, when Xia Yubing, who was already incomparably powerful, took out her mystical rune divine weapon, how terrifying would her battle prowess be? Many martial artists held their breaths. Xia Yubing, who had activated her sword intent to the extreme, in addition to the frost horn dragon sword, emitted a powerful aura that almost suffocated them. Swords are indeed important to sword cultivators. However, this is Chu Donglio's sword, not yours. Feeling the sharp aura emitted from Xia Yubing's body, Yi Guqin also frowned. However, he still did not show any fear and faced it seriously. I'll let you experience what a Sword King divine weapon is. Xia Yubing slowly stepped out with the frost-horn dragon sword in her hand. Her ice-blue hair fluttered. With every step she took, her aura increased by a bit. In addition to the ice sword intent that spread in all directions, the current Xia Yubing was like an ice goddess descending to the mortal world, sending down tribulation. She struck out with her sword again. It was still the glacier sword art from before, but the power was incomparable. An endless stream of icy air swept towards Yiguchen, as if the glaciers in the heavenly river were reversing. Even the outer true energy barrier was suffused with traces of frost. Yiguchen frowned as he sensed a terrifying aura. This was the power of the frozen horned dragon sword. God-slaying sword technique, Yellow Springs. Yiguchen's 1,000 feet wide golden chi sea surged like waves as the Azura power rushed towards the Calamity Dust Sword. The Calamity Dust Sword, which was originally covered in natural lightning patterns, now seemed to be condensed from blood. It carried a terrifying killing intent. He slashed out with his sword, causing a river of blood to overturn the heavens. That killing intent shook one's mind. Bang! It was as if a destructive explosion had erupted. Boundless sword chi rushed into the sky and spread out in all directions. Cracks appeared on the ground. Cold currents swept through the air, and a bloody light pierced through the sky. However, when everyone focused their gazes, they were shocked to discover that the cold sword chi had directly torn apart the blood river. The remaining sword chi surged violently towards Yiguchen. Seeing this, Yiguchen activated the heavenly sun mystic underworld fire in his body. Endless strange flames swept out, wanting to resist Xia Yubing's move. However, Xia Yubing's eyes revealed a cold glint. The corner of her mouth curved into a mocking smile. She activated the frozen horned dragon sword again. Spirit patterns flickered on the sword's body. Like formation patterns, they meandered along the sword's body. Boom! The sword that was already powerful to begin with, under the support of the divine weapon with mystical patterns, erupted with extreme power. Yiguchen coughed out blood from the corner of his mouth. His figure flew backwards, and the frozen horned dragon crystal armor emitted cracking sounds. Even if it was a spirit-grade defensive divine weapon, it was still somewhat unable to withstand the sword chi of a divine weapon with mystical patterns. In addition, the frozen horned dragon crystal armor had not been fully repaired, so cracks spread out like a spider web. Don't. Yiguchen's feet stepped on the ground, creating a deep pit with each step. That was because he was under extreme pressure from the sword chi. Even his bones were emitting cracking sounds. It was hard to imagine that Yiguchen, who had a perfect physical body and the power of dragons and elephants, was still completely suppressed by Xia Yubing. The frozen horned dragon sword and the ice sword intent, as well as the compatibility of their attributes, erupted with a power that shocked everyone. Seeing Yiguchen being heavily injured by a single sword strike, many cultivators sucked in a breath of cold air. Before, Xia Yubing and Yiguchen had won and lost, going back and forth. But now, after Xia Yubing took out the frozen horned dragon sword, the increase in her battle strength had almost completely crushed Yiguchen. Clang, clang, clang. How could Xia Yubing let go of such an advantage? Her figure fluttered like a fairy, like an ice crane. The frozen horned dragon sword in her hands swept towards Yiguchen. Yiguchen blocked with his sword. With a clang, the Calamity Dust sword faintly emitted cracking sounds. Not good. Hearing this sound, Su Jianshir's heart was in her throat. Her jade-like hands tightly grasped her skirt, and her charming eyes revealed a nervous expression. Bang! After one strike, Yiguchen's figure was once again pushed back, his blood and chi churning endlessly. Yiguchen, it's over, Xia Yubing coldly shouted. The surrounding cold air seemed to be like rivers flowing into the sea, converging towards the frozen horned dragon sword. On the crystal-like body of the dark blue sword, there seemed to be an illusory image of a hornless dragon. Of course, this phantom wasn't real. It was formed by the power of many spiritual marks stacked together. Shenluo Heavenly Sword. Xia Yubing's sword swept out, and the sword chi of the frozen horned dragon sword violently erupted. This sword move wasn't of the ice attribute, but the fluctuations were still shocking. Could it be a king-grade sword art? Many people cried out in alarm, because the power of Xia Yubing's sword was earth-shattering. No, there are some fluctuations of a king-grade sword art, but it's not complete. The experts of the 7 great powers had high standards, and spoke at this moment. Facing this terrifying sword attack, Yiguchen also had some understanding. This must be the incomplete king-grade sword art that Xia Yubing comprehended in the venerable cave-dwelling's sword cavern. Because of the Enlightenment Leaf support, in addition to the sword cavern's mysteries, Xia Yubing was able to quickly display this kind of supreme technique. Although she couldn't completely display the power of this sword move, she could still display its initial power. An incomplete king-grade sword art? Yiguchen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Facing this heaven-shaking sword, Yiguchen's gaze sharpened. He swung the Calamity Dust sword again, and a shocking bloodthirsty aura burst out with a loud bang. At this moment, Yiguchen fully activated the Azura power in his body and poured it into the Calamity Dust sword. What he held in his hand was a sword that seemed to be completely condensed from blood. What a terrifying power! If Xia Yubing's sword was said to be frightening, then Yiguchen's sword was said to be hair-raising. It was as if they were facing an Azura-killing god. God-slaying sword art. Yiguchen's voice was hoarse, and the Azura power in his body converged into a sword attack, exploding out with a loud bang. 3 paths. God-slaying sword art's 4th move, 3 paths. Boom. A gust of extremely bitter killing intent suddenly surged into the 9 heavens. At this moment, the battlefield was like the Yellow Springs. The incomparably huge sword energy blood river directly split into 3, surrounding Xia Yubing and attacking. Its power was 3 times that of the 3rd move, Yellow Springs. Xia Yubing frowned. She also felt a type of terrifying killing power. Her ice sword intent was also activated, increasing the power of this sword strike. Boom! An indescribable explosion rang out. It was as if a star from outer space had exploded. Chaotic sword chi swept out in all directions like raging waves. Numerous cracks appeared on the ground. The sky prides in the distance were blasted back. They had all suffered quite a bit of damage. In the midst of this impact, everyone heard a crisp cracking sound. That was the sound of something breaking, impossible. Su Jianshir's face was as white as a sheet. In the battlefield, the smoke and dust scattered. Everyone looked over and sucked in a breath of cold air. Xia Yubing's ice hornless dragon sword collided with Yiguchen's Calamity Dust sword. Spiderweb-like cracks spread across the Calamity Dust sword. Break! Xia Yubing shouted, and the Calamity Dust sword exploded. Chapter 204. Bang! It was accompanied by a crisp cracking sound. The Calamity Dust sword that had accompanied Yiguchen for a long time exploded into countless metal fragments at this moment. Yiguchen's expression froze. He didn't panic at all. With a flick of his wrist, he blocked the sharp fragments with his meteor soft sword. He coughed out blood as his ribs cracked. At the same time, sword chi entered his body, causing him to be injured again. Xia Yubing's chest felt stuffy as many wounds appeared on her arm. She retreated with a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth. Yiguchen's 3 paths had also injured her. However, by relying on the advantage of her divine weapon, Xia Yubing still had the advantage in this attack. Xia Yubing once again rushed towards Yiguchen and slashed down with her sword. Clearly, she wanted to break Yiguchen's meteor soft sword. Xia Yubing was confident in the power of her divine weapon. Seeing Xia Yubing's actions, everyone sighed inwardly. Su Jianshir clenched her teeth and said angrily, "What kind of ability is relying on a divine weapon?" Many sword cultivators were also silently criticizing Xia Yubing. However, most of them didn't say anything. A divine weapon was also a part of one's strength. Since Xia Yubing had inherited all of the North River Sword King's inheritance, her divine weapon was naturally a part of her strength. However, contrary to Xia Yubing's expectations, her sword didn't break the meteor soft sword as she had imagined. When the 2 swords clashed, dazzling sparks flew. Yiguchen's blood-stained lips curled into a faint smile. Although his meteor soft sword was only a high-grade divine weapon, it was an elite item that had been refined 100,000 times. In addition, it was made of golden ring heavenly silk steel. Such a flexible metal couldn't be easily broken. Yiguchen's hard and soft sword intent was unleashed. The meteor soft sword instantly softened as it clashed with the glacial hornless dragon sword. This displayed Yiguchen's extraordinary battle experience. He skillfully used the hard and soft sword intent. He used the soft sword to dissolve the glacial hornless dragon sword's power. He took the opportunity to counterattack with his steel sword. Of course, Xia Yubing wasn't someone easy to deal with. Her ice sword intent continued to spread, supporting the frozen horned dragon sword. Sword of the Void, 100 waves. Yiguchen shook his sword once again. Waves of void sword wave spread out, shaking towards Xia Yubing. Xia Yubing once again took out the white tortoise shell. Although it was filled with cracks, it still possessed a powerful defensive power. However, contrary to Xia Yubing's expectations, more than half of the void sword wave actually passed through the white tortoise shell, ruthlessly smashing into her delicate body. Cough. Xia Yubing's expression changed as her beautiful face turned pale. She hurriedly used her true qi to suppress the vibrations in her body. That terrifying vibrational force almost instantly caused Xia Yubing to suffer quite a bit of injury. Seeing this, Yiguchen's eyes glinted like swords. He rushed forward, and his sword vibrated even more violently. His sword wave seemed to resonate with the void, and waves of translucent sword waves overlapped with each other. That fluctuation even far surpassed the might of the 100-fold wave. Sword of the Void, 1,000 waves. A buzzing sound exploded in the void, as if a divine drum had been beaten. The terrifying sword wave swept towards Xia Yubing, wave after wave, like a collapsing dam. No less than 1,000 waves of sword wave. The Sword of the Void was the spirit-level sword technique of the Limitless Sword sect. Therefore, the people who were the most shocked were none other than the people from the Limitless Sword sect. Especially Xian Ying, who had lost the Void Sword wave to Yiguchen. Even now, he still hadn't reached great success in the Sword of the Void. How is this possible? How long has it been since I lost the Sword of the Void to him? How could he have reached great success in the spirit-level sword technique so quickly? Xian Ying couldn't believe Yiguchen. This child's comprehension of sword techniques can be called monstrous. Even Xian Tai couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. They naturally didn't know that Yiguchen already had a foundation. Adding his own talent, the seed of the sword heart, and the leaf of enlightenment. With all these factors added together, Yiguchen was able to master several spirit-level sword techniques in the sword cavern of the Venerable Realm and reach great success in comprehending them. Xia Yubing's expression was also grave as she faced Yiguchen's ultimate move. She stepped on the ground, and icy sword qi spread out, blocking the void sword wave. At the same time, she once again activated the vast might of the icy hornless dragon sword. On the body of the sword, spiritual patterns lit up, connecting into one. This was a divine weapon with spiritual patterns. It wasn't like a divine weapon with spiritual patterns, which only had a few spiritual patterns. Slash! Xia Yubing shouted. Her icy blue hair fluttered in the wind. She seemed to have returned to being simple. She attacked with an extremely simple sword, but it contained boundless might. Everywhere it passed, the earth turned into frost, and the void froze. Bang! Many ripples erupted in the area. Waves of void sword wave surged in all directions, and a chill surged. Xia Yubing and Yiguchen were entangled in a battle. With the battle having reached such a stage, there was nothing much to say. The only thing that could be done was to risk their lives, to exchange injuries for injuries. Xia Yubing pointed her sword at Yiguchen. Yiguchen moved to the side, but his shoulder was struck by the icy hornless dragon sword. Although he had the dragon armor of ice and fire protecting him, it was already full of cracks. It wasn't far from being scrapped. However, at the same time that Yiguchen was injured, he also erupted with void sword wave, sweeping it towards Xia Yubing. Xia Yubing's true qi exploded, but she was still injured. The two retreated, coughing up blood at the same time. However, because of the icy hornless dragon sword, Yiguchen's injuries were more serious. However, what made Xia Yubing's expression turn gloomy was that although Yiguchen's injuries were more serious than hers, his blood was surging, and his true qi was surging. His wounds were able to quickly stop bleeding. Therefore, from the looks of it, it was Xia Yubing who was at a disadvantage. Damn it, why is this Yiguchen's physical body so powerful? His recovery ability is also so strong. Xia Yubing's beautiful eyes sank. She discovered that the true qi in her body was showing signs of not being enough. Although Xia Yubing was a proud daughter of heaven, and the scope of her qi far exceeded that of ordinary geniuses, it was still impossible for her to compare with Yiguchen's 1,000 zhang qi. In addition, Xia Yubing had used the heavenly frost-flowing snow sword formation before, as well as the sword intent, which consumed a lot of true qi. The bloody battle had continued for such a long time, and even Xia Yubing felt somewhat exhausted. As if seeing Xia Yubing showing signs of not being able to endure, Yiguchen's attacks became even fiercer. His sword was like a graceful swan, and his sword qi swept out in all directions. Xia Yubing's true qi seems to be somewhat lacking. After fighting for such a long time, why is Yiguchen still full of vigor, and his true qi is so vast? Even if he had a 20 zhang qi before, his true qi shouldn't be this vigorous. Many people were shocked and at the same time, puzzled. The people of the 7 major powers looked at Yiguchen as if they were looking at a rare animal. Yiguchen's powerful physical body and vigorous true qi made them tremble in fear. The spectators started whispering, and all of them were discussing. However, it was obvious that many people saw that Xia Yubing's true qi was lacking, so some people gradually thought more highly of Yiguchen. I can't lose. I, Xia Yubing, am a proud daughter of heaven. I definitely can't lose this battle. Xia Yubing waved her sword, and her sword aura was extremely powerful. However, although Yiguchen's body was covered in wounds and blood was flowing from the corner of his mouth, his true qi was still surging, and his blood was flowing like a tide. This made Xia Yubing's heart shrouded in a haze. With her pride, she definitely couldn't lose this battle. Moreover, Xia Yubing knew that if she lost, it would be equivalent to death. After another sword exchange, Xia Yubing's figure stabilized. She looked at Yiguchen, and her ice-blue eyes surged with an indescribable emotion. Why, Yiguchen, why is it that in front of Yubing, you are always blocking Yiguchen's figure? Xia Yubing tightly gripped the frozen nightmare dragon sword, and her knuckles turned white from the force. No matter if it was in the past or now, I'm not blocking in front of you. It's you who can only stand behind me. Yiguchen's tone was indifferent. The condition of his body wasn't very good either. Even if his perfect physical body had a stronger recovery ability, it couldn't completely heal all his injuries. Therefore, Yiguchen's injuries were still gradually worsening. However, at this moment, Yiguchen was waiting with rapt attention, and at the same time, frowning. The frozen nightmare dragon sword and ice sword intent had already been displayed. Yiguchen didn't understand how Xia Yubing could still fight. Is that so? Peh. Xia Yubing laughed, and an extreme hatred surged in her ice-blue eyes. Since that's the case, then let me, Yubing, personally get rid of you. Xia Yubing's origin ring flashed, and a deep blue jade bottle appeared. Xia Yubing shattered the jade bottle, and a sparkling and translucent ice-blue pill that emitted an endless chill appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Yiguchen, you forced me to do this. In the following battle, if you can withstand it, Xia Yubing will stretch out my neck for you to kill. Xia Yubing's ice-blue hair fluttered in the wind. Her blood-stained red lips opened slightly, and she swallowed the pill, as if a goddess had entered a demonic state. Chapter 205. Xia Yubing's move was out of everyone's expectations. Although the martial practitioners didn't know what the ice-blue pill was used for, since Xia Yubing had swallowed it, it must have some effect. Many people's expressions changed. Although the Elite Association didn't have the rule of not swallowing pills in battle, since it was a decisive battle, taking the initiative to swallow a pill would obviously be looked down upon by some people. Even the martial practitioners who supported Xia Yubing didn't clamor anymore. There was a kind of speechless awkwardness. However, Xia Yubing knew that she couldn't lose. Therefore, even if her reputation would be affected, she had to do it. This Ice Soul Divine Pill is another thing I obtained apart from the Frozen Horn Dragon Sword. I originally didn't plan to swallow it, but it's all because of you. Xia Yubing looked at Yiguchen, seemingly filled with endless hatred. With my, Xia Yubing's, talent, I could have broken through to the Divine Soul Realm on my own. I could have completely comprehended the Ice Sword intent and turned it into Sword Dao on my own. But now, in order to kill you, I can only swallow the Ice Soul Divine Pill and forcefully advance. Doing this will harm my Dao foundation, and may even harm my future cultivation. It's all because of you, Yiguchen. Therefore you must die. Xia Yubing's long blue hair fluttered in the wind. Her peerless face seemed to have been possessed by a devil. After swallowing the Ice Soul Divine Pill, her aura rose uncontrollably. A terrifying chill that was enough to freeze the surroundings gushed out from her delicate body. Yiguchen's eyes flashed. He naturally couldn't watch Xia Yubing swallow the pill and break through. Kill! Yiguchen's golden chi-si in his dantian was pushed to the limit. The meteorite's soft sword pierced out. God-slaying sword technique, 3 paths. 3 incomparably huge rivers of blood of sword chi rushed out with Yiguchen's sword, attacking Xia Yubing. It's too late. Xia Yubing's eyes were cold. At this moment, divine light circulated on her skin. A powerful aura spread out with her body as the center, forming a storm that spread in all directions. Yiguchen's sharp sword aura was completely blocked. Xia Yubing's hair fluttered in the wind. Her eyes shone with divine light, as if a goddess was about to ascend. Her half-step divine soul aura also rose once more. All of the spectators were stupefied. Xia Yubing's sudden change was outside of their expectations. Even the people of the 7 great factions narrowed their eyes and wore serious expressions. Xia Yubing's aura rapidly charged towards the divine soul realm. At the same time, an even more terrifying fluctuation was brewing within Xia Yubing's body. That fluctuation. At the edge of the battlefield, Yuan Mie frowned. Only those who possess sword intent would be able to sense the changes in Xia Yubing's sword intent. Could it be? Not only Yuan Mie, even Yiguchen, who was at the center of the battlefield, naturally sensed Xia Yubing's changes. Regardless of whether it was the change in the realm or the change in the fluctuation of the sword essence. The effects of the Ice Soul Divine Pill surprised even Yiguchen. Clearly, the Ice Soul Divine Pill was the same as the Frozen Horn Dragon Sword. They were both the most precious treasures of the Sword King Chu Donglio's inheritance. At this moment, Xia Yubing had consumed the Ice Soul Divine Pill and erupted with a powerful aura. Even Yiguchen felt that it was a little troublesome. Although she consumed the pill, victory and defeat will be decided once Xia Yubing breaks through. Regardless of whether it was the 7 great factions or the tens of thousands of cultivators, they all had the same thought. The aura and pressure emitted by Xia Yubing made a few Divine Soul Realm experts frown as they felt a faint sense of threat. Since she consumed the pill, then? Yiguchen muttered coldly. He had never underestimated Xia Yubing. At this moment, Xia Yubing's breakthrough with the help of the Ice Soul Divine Pill made him feel an enormous pressure. Therefore, Yiguchen also had to have a method to contend against her. As if he had made a decision, Yiguchen flipped his wrist and took out a simple golden pill with the carvings of the 5 divine beasts. It was the 5-colored golden pill that Yiguchen had obtained from the barbarian race expert in the bottomless devil abyss. Although Yiguchen was still unsure of the effects of the 5-colored golden pill, the faint refining power was something that Yiguchen needed. Currently, his tendon-changing scripture and marrow-cleansing scripture had reached large success. He was just a step away from merging them and cultivating the indestructible diamond body. Right now, Xia Yubing's cultivation was rising steadily. Her sword essence was also undergoing a terrifying change. If Yiguchen was still hesitating, he might really fall into a great crisis. After making up his mind, Yiguchen swallowed the 5-colored golden elixir. Seeing that Yiguchen had also swallowed an elixir, the spectators had a strange look on their faces. Was this a competition to see who had more pills? Xia Yubing, who was in the midst of breaking through, also saw Yiguchen's actions. Her expression immediately darkened. However, she was confident that Yiguchen's pill was definitely inferior to her Ice Soul Divine pill. The originally dust-filled battlefield instantly fell into a short period of deathly silence. However, everyone knew that this was the sign of a storm. Both Xia Yubing and Yiguchen had taken medicinal pills. Whoever broke through first would be able to seize the initiative and even win. When the 5-colored golden pill entered his body, Yiguchen knew that it was definitely not just a pill. This was because the 5-colored golden pill did not dissolve at all. Instead, it directly entered Yiguchen's dantian. At the same time, a powerful suction force surged out from the 5-colored golden pill and began to devour Yiguchen's qi and blood. What? Yiguchen was taken aback by this sudden turn of events. Other pills increased one's strength, but this 5-colored golden pill was madly devouring Yiguchen's qi and blood. Fortunately, Yiguchen had a perfect body, and he had mastered 2 body tempering techniques. Only then could he provide such exuberant qi and blood. If it was an ordinary cultivator, they would probably be sucked dry in an instant. Although he did not know what this 5-colored divine beast golden pill was used for, Yiguchen felt that it was definitely not simple. He activated the qi and blood in his body and poured it into the 5-colored golden pill. In front of Yiguchen, Xia Yubing's figure was hidden within the ice storm. However, the ripples she emitted were rising in intensity. Even people as strong as Yuan Mie, Shinta Miao, and the others frowned when they felt Xia Yubing's aura. This suffocating atmosphere lasted for about a quarter of an hour. Rumble. A low rumble came from within the ice storm, as if true qi was exploding and spirit power was shaking. Xia Yubing is about to succeed. She's about to break through to the divine soul realm. Many people cried out in surprise, widening their eyes to see this scene clearly. The gap between half-step divine soul realm and divine soul realm was huge. Boom! Another explosion sounded, and the surging true qi storm spread in all directions. Wind and snow filled the sky, and true qi surged. The blue-haired Xia Yubing was like a goddess breaking out of a cocoon, and her aura was terrifying. Divine Soul Realm. Not only that, Xia Yubing slowly walked forward. Every single step that landed on the ground gave off a peculiar aura that pervaded the air. She slowly raised her hand, and then slowly pressed it down. Boom! A terrifying ice domain spread out, and instantly enveloped the entire battlefield covered in true qi. Inside the ice domain, endless frost and snow soared, making Xia Yubing look like an ice goddess. Ice Sword Dao, I've broken through. Divine Soul Realm, I've broken through. Yiguchen, what are you going to use to fight me? Chapter 206. Xia Yubing's voice was as cold as water, as if she was speaking to an ice goddess. The surrounding space was filled with coldness. Sword Qi was like frost, covering the entire area. Not to mention Yiguchen, who was at the center. Even the geniuses who had retreated to the periphery felt a bone-chilling coldness. That coldness was like the tip of a sword pressing against their hearts. He has indeed made a breakthrough. Yuan Mie's deathly still eyes began to ripple. As someone who also possessed sword intent, he knew what realm Xia Yubing had reached. Ice Sword Dao. As Xia Yubing's voice rang out, everyone's faces froze. Numerous gazes seemed to have been nailed onto Xia Yubing's body, unable to leave it all. Even the higher-ups of the 7 major powers, such as Xian Tai and the others, couldn't remain calm. Sword Dao, it really is the Sword Dao. Xia Yubing actually used a pill to break through the bottleneck of the Sword Dao. The charming woman from the consonant's divine palace's higher-ups muttered in surprise. Sword intent, Sword Dao. The difference of a single word was like the difference between heaven and earth. Sword intent was the foundation of the Sword Dao, the initial comprehension. When Sword intent transformed into Sword Dao, it would give birth to all sorts of unimaginable Sword Dao techniques, and it could even form a Sword Dao domain. It was just like the ice domain that Xia Yubing was emitting. Within this domain, Xia Yubing's abilities would expand infinitely, and the power of her sword moves would also multiply. Although she had only broken through to the Ice Sword Dao, the domain she emitted wasn't weak. Xia Yubing is truly a genius. Sword Dao, it actually transformed into sword Dao. What an amazing talent! There were people from the 7 major powers who praised her. Many cultivators who supported Xia Yubing cheered again, their faces flushed red from excitement. Using a pill to break through the sword Dao isn't stable, Feng Manlu muttered, shaking his head slightly. On the stage, the entire area of the true energy barrier was covered by Xia Yubing's ice domain. Although it was only in the initial stages, its power made many geniuses feel shocked and powerless. Xia Yubing moved gracefully like a goddess, looking down at Yiguchen, who still hadn't changed much. Looks like Yubing has won this time. Xia Yubing once again took out her frost hornless dragon sword. At the same time, a powerful aura was released. Although this aura wasn't particularly stable, it did indeed belong to a divine soul realm expert. Yiguchen's current situation was not very good, because he found that the 5-colored golden core in his body was very greedy. Even after devouring so much blood and qi, there was still no reaction. On the contrary, Yiguchen's body was gradually weakening due to the excessive amount of qi and blood he had devoured. Could it be that I was wrong? Yiguchen's lips began to turn pale. There was no color in them. His aura was declining. Looks like your medicinal pill didn't display the effect it should have. Even the heavens are standing on Yubing's side. Xia Yubing coldly laughed. Without saying anything more, she directly attacked. As the frost hornless dragon sword was swung out, the surrounding ice domain began to vibrate. Countless frosty sword chi swirled around like tornadoes. Yiguchen used his wave-like subtle steps, but he felt as if he had stepped into a swamp. His speed was twice as slow as before. This was the suppression of Yiguchen's ice domain. And within the ice domain, the power of Xia Yubing's sword techniques was greatly increased. She only casually swung her sword, and the frosty sword chi was like a huge snowy dragon that roared and howled, breaking through Yiguchen's defense. With a puchi, he coughed up blood and flew backwards. The dragon armor of ice and fire was unable to withstand such power, and was on the verge of shattering. Die! Xia Yubing's eyes were cold. She had waited for this moment for too long. Yiguchen used the 4th style of the god-slaying sword technique again, 3 paths. 3 streams of Yellow Spring's blood rivers of sword chi erupted, but they were once again weakened by the ice domain. Clang! The frost hornless dragon sword repelled the meteor soft sword, and then under everyone's shocked gazes, it touched Yiguchen's dragon armor of ice and fire. Break! Xia Yubing coldly rebuked. The dragon armor of ice and fire exploded into countless fragments. Yiguchen spat out a large mouthful of blood. His body flew back dozens of feet like a kite with its string cut. Silly boy! Su Jianshir's face turned pale. She wanted to charge out, but she was desperately held back by Zither Fairy and by Yenji. Now that Xia Yubing had broken through with the help of pills, she was the strongest among the prodigies. With the ice domain activated, even Shinta Miao and Yuan Mie were no match for her. At this moment, Xia Yubing was invincible among the prodigies here. Yiguchen dai, Xia Yubing said coldly. Her tone carried a trace of relief and a trace of pleasure. With her mindset, she naturally wouldn't give Yiguchen a chance to catch his breath. She stabbed her sword at Yiguchen, who was flying backwards. Yiguchen's mouth and chin were covered in blood. He once again blocked with the meteor soft sword. However, at this critical moment, a cold light suddenly stabbed at Yiguchen's back from the side. That cold light was actually the glacier sword. Everyone cried out in alarm. Su Jianshir's delicate body was trembling. Xia Yubing was extremely scheming. After breaking through to the divine soul realm, she quietly took out the glacier sword, using the storm of icy sword energy to cover it. At the most critical moment, she borrowed the power of her soul to assassinate Yiguchen, wanting to give him a fatal blow. Yiguchen, who had blocked the frost hornless dragon sword with his meteor soft sword, was powerless to block the glacier sword. It's over. Yiguchen is going to die. Many people shook their heads and sighed. However, Xia Yubing was stunned. She saw that the youth who blocked her sword didn't have the slightest bit of fear on his face. Instead, he was incomparably calm. What other tricks do you have? Xia Yubing couldn't think of any way Yiguchen could block this sure kill attack. Rumble, a faint rumbling sound resounded in all directions. It was as if thunder was rolling. What's going on? Is there thunder? Many cultivators were astonished. They looked up at the sky. No, it's coming from Yiguchen. Some cultivators were shocked as they looked at the battle between life and death. Clang. The glacier sword stabbed at Yiguchen's back with a sharp and cold sword energy. However, the expected attack didn't appear. At this moment, Yiguchen's body was trembling like thunder. He was like a volcano that was about to erupt. Indestructible Vajra body, break. In the next moment, Yiguchen's body emitted boundless golden light. Countless golden scriptures were emitted, as if ancient Buddhas were chanting. Golden light surged on Yiguchen's body. The body metamorphose scripture and marrow cleansing scripture had completely merged together. At the most critical moment, the five-colored golden core in his dantian had finally started to feed back. Endless blood chi and refining power spread out, helping Yiguchen break through to the indestructible Vajra body. Kacha! Under everyone's shocked gazes, the glacier sword that was stabbing at Yiguchen exploded into a ball of ice crystals. Chapter 207. The minds of all the spectating martial artists went blank for a moment. It was as if their thoughts had stopped in that instant. Not only did he block the assassination of a divine weapon with spirit runes with his corporeal body, he even shattered it? If anyone else said this to them, they would definitely not believe it and would laugh their heads off. But now, this ridiculous scene was truly displayed in front of their eyes. The shattered glacier sword scattered in all directions, and Xia Yubing's pupils suddenly contracted. How could Xia Yubing miscalculated? No, it should be said that she didn't miscalculate. The success rate of this killing move was indeed 100%. It was just that Yiguchen's performance far exceeded that of an ordinary person. At this moment, Yiguchen's body was overflowing with golden light, and the surrounding space seemed to be imprinted with golden runes. Flowers fell from the sky, and golden lotuses sprouted from the ground. It was as if an ancient Buddha was chanting in the void. Unbreakable Vajra body was a realm that only one of the top 10 experts of the martial world, first ancestor Bodhidharma, had reached. Now Yiguchen had also reached it. At this moment, Yiguchen felt that his corporeal body was one, perfect and flawless. At the same time, his strength was even more powerful than before. Although his skin was overflowing with golden light, it was still soft. However, the feeling of toughness made it impossible for ordinary divine weapons with spirit runes to cut through his skin. Is this the realm that first ancestor Bodhidharma had reached? Yiguchen felt his pores opening as if his corporeal body was breathing in and out the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. This kind of corporeal body feeling was incomparably mysterious. At this moment, he even felt that just by relying on his corporeal body, he could compete with a divine soul realm expert. Xia Yubing, let's fight again. Yiguchen held the meteor flexible sword and slashed out again. A fierce and domineering sword slashed towards Xia Yubing. Yiguchen, who had activated the unbreakable Vajra body, was now a little frighteningly strong. This is really annoying. Xia Yubing's expression completely darkened. In her eyes, Yiguchen seemed to have an inexhaustible trump card. Even such a killing move couldn't kill him. An unforeseen event had occurred. Clang! The sword edge surged, and violent ripples of sword chi surged out in all directions. The earth seemed to be churning like an earth dragon, and soil and stone fragments flew high into the air. They once again engaged in a chaotic battle. Sword chi fluctuations filled the sky. After breaking through to the invincible Vajra level, the injuries on Yiguchen's body had also recovered a little. As for Xia Yubing, with her strength at the Divine Soul realm and her ice domain, she still showed signs of suppressing Yiguchen. In fact, if it wasn't Xia Yubing, if it was anyone else, even the previous Xian Ying, by relying on Yiguchen's current invincible Vajra body, they would be able to contend against him. However, Xia Yubing, who possessed the Ice Sword Way, possessed strength that even surpassed that of Xian Ying from before. That was why Yiguchen did not have an obvious advantage. This Yiguchen is truly astonishing. His physical body is truly powerful. Many people had previously believed that Xia Yubing was about to obtain victory, yet such an unforeseen event had occurred. In particular, the phenomenon displayed by Yiguchen's physical body caused many people to be shocked. This physical body is probably not much weaker than that of the barbarian race, who specializes in refining their physical bodies. Elder Qing He of the Sword Sect's Forest of Towers sighed. Chu Qingqi watched the battle calmly from the side, but inwardly he was thinking, "Brother Yi, is this your true trump card?" Clang, clang, clang. Sword Qi rumbled, and the sound of metal clashing shook the sky. Although Yi Guchen's physical combat strength was unparalleled, he was still trapped in Xia Yubing's ice domain. As time passed, Xia Yubing's expression became more and more impatient. Although she had broken through to the Divine Soul realm, maintaining the ice domain consumed a lot of energy. "Yi Guchen, you have exceeded Yubing's expectations time and time again, but now..." Xia Yubing's voice paused. She released all of her soul power from her mind, forming a transparent ripple that swept out in all directions. Yi Guchen waited with rapt attention, tightly grasping the meteor-soft sword. "The way of the sword of ice far surpasses your imagination," Xia Yubing shouted. Shortly after, the earth rumbled and trembled. Everyone could see that the earth within the true energy barrier was churning, as if something was about to break out of the ground. "Domain of ice, ancient profound ice sword Qi," Xia Yubing shouted. The earth split open, and the ice domain trembled. Sword Qi with endless chilliness broke out of the ground, directly tearing the earth apart. The sky shook, and snowflakes fluttered like dragons. The earth was torn apart, and endless sword Qi was frozen. This was a shocking scene. Even the true energy barrier was trembling and freezing, as if it couldn't withstand this mighty force. At this moment, everyone was watching in a daze, as if they were possessed. "Yi Guchen, this is my way of the sword, the way of the sword of ice. How are you going to block it?" Xia Yubing's voice coldly shouted in the wind and snow, as if she was going to use all of her strength to deliver a killing blow to Yi Guchen. No matter what methods Yi Guchen had, no matter what trump cards Yi Guchen had, no matter what strength Yi Guchen had, this move of Xia Yubing's carried the way of the sword of ice. She wanted to completely cut off Yi Guchen's life. Rumble. Yi Guchen's figure was directly engulfed by the endless sword Qi. Even the piece of earth he was standing on was torn into countless pieces. Xia Yubing seemed to be still not at ease. A cold light gathered in her eyes, and she stretched out her hand, using another secret technique. "Ice sealing secret technique." Xia Yubing shouted, and the surrounding ice condensed again, completely covering Yi Guchen's body. It was as if endless ice crystals had gathered together and wanted to seal Yi Guchen's body within. This was the North River Sword King's secret technique, used to seal the body of others in ice. It was only at this moment that Xia Yubing used her ultimate move. She didn't want to give Yi Guchen any chance of survival. Again. Xia Yubing's voice was cold. After sealing Yi Guchen in ice, she used her ultimate move again. The ancient profound ice sword Qi seemed to have transformed into a furious ice dragon, and once again engulfed Yi Guchen's location. Such a series of ultimate moves made everyone's heart tremble and their eyelids twitched. They asked themselves, if they were in Yi Guchen's place, under such an attack, not even dregs would be left behind. After using her ultimate move continuously, Xia Yubing was gasping for breath. The true Qi in her body was on the verge of drying up, and her soul force was also greatly consumed. At the same time, her blue robe was torn in many places, revealing her blood-stained skin. The bloodstains on her body were like peach blossoms. But when she looked at the place where there wasn't any sound, her originally cold and beautiful face finally revealed a smile of relief. The originally rumbling battlefield quietened down. The earth shattered, and frost spread. Many heaven's prides were affected, and spat out blood. However, the place where Yi Guchen was standing was already sealed by a large piece of ice crystals, and at the same time, there were many cracks caused by sword Qi. Not a single sound could be heard from the frozen area. She won. Xia Yubing won. Some people were at a loss, but even more people who supported Xia Yubing cheered. Has the dust settled? Xian Tai revealed a pondering expression, as if he was considering how to rope Xia Yubing in. How is that possible? Chu Qingqi frowned in disbelief. Silly boy. Su Jianshi muttered. Her lips were as pale as paper, but she was stubborn. She didn't believe Yi Guqin would lose just like that. He wasn't just Yi Guqin, but also Dugubai in her heart. The grudges have already been settled. Everything ends when one dies. Yi Guqin, the final victor will still be me, Xia Yubing. Xia Yubing's face was filled with joy and relief. The knot that had been weighing on her heart for a long time was finally untied. The obstacle in front of her no longer existed. Xia Yubing turned around, and with her back to the frozen block, she looked at the 7 factions and the tens of thousands of cultivators. She was basking in the glory of victory. However, rumble, the already broken earth began to tremble and shatter once again. It was as if something was about to jump out of hell. Look, look. Some cultivators were shocked. They reached out and pointed behind Xia Yubing. Xia Yubing's smile froze. She turned around in disbelief. The frozen block was trembling violently. Cracks spread on its surface, and the original power of the ice was quickly disintegrating. Then, accompanied by an earth-shaking rumble, the large crystal shattered, turning into ice fragments that filled the sky and shot out in all directions. A blood-colored sword intent that was as deep as an abyss shook the heavens and earth, shaking the 9 heavens. A figure holding a sword and covered in blood walked out like an Asura from hell. My sword sex Yi Guqin broke through the 18 blood prisons, experienced 9 illusions, and finally obtained this sword intent. Yi Guqin's eyes were as red as blood. His sword intent filled the sky as he looked at Xia Yubing. An Asura is heartless. You can't bear it. Chapter 208. Yi Guqin's tone was as cold as the whisper of an Asura. He slowly raised his meteor-soft sword. The blade was as red as blood, and he casually swung it to one side. A glaring blood-red sword light tore through the air, plowing a 100-meter-long crack in the ground. It was just a casual strike, but it could split a 100-meter-long crack in the ground. At this moment, the sky changed color, and the crowd trembled. His black robe was torn and covered in blood. Although he had the diamond indestructible body, Xia Yubing's ultimate killing move still caused him serious injuries. However, Yi Guqin, who was bathed in blood, had a deeper understanding of the Asura sword intent. At this moment, he had completely unleashed the Asura sword intent that he had been hiding. Blood-red light filled the sky, and the sword intent swept across the area. Standing alone, the meteor-soft sword in his hand seemed to be unable to withstand the baptism of the Asura sword intent, and it let out an earth-shaking cry. Standing alone, the sword cried out. Blood-red light filled the sky, and the Asura move. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. A shocked and trembling expression appeared on the faces of all the spectators. Whether it was the tens of thousands of warriors or the 7 major powers, there was only one emotion on their faces. Extreme shock. At this moment, Yi Guqin was like an Asura who had just emerged from hell. The chilling sword intent spread out and covered the entire area. Dual sword intent. Some people's teeth were chattering, and they couldn't even speak clearly. As for Lu Tianying and the others who had a grudge against Yi Guqin, their bodies were trembling. They looked at Yi Guqin with extreme fear in their eyes. Peerless sword intent. Feng Manlu's face was no longer calm, and it slowly turned serious. This was a power that even he couldn't ignore. Sword intent was divided into 3 grades: ordinary, peerless, and fortune. As long as one comprehended the ordinary sword intent, he or she could be called a genius among swordsmen. For example, Xia Yubing's ice sword intent, Yu Shicho's water sword intent, Yuan Mie's darkness sword intent, and so on. As for the peerless sword intent, only those with great luck and perseverance could comprehend it. The power of the peerless sword intent far surpassed the ordinary sword intent, and it could bring a sword cultivator greater strength. It could be said that in the Saint Origin dynasty, There were still a few geniuses who had comprehended ordinary sword intent. However, there were almost no geniuses who had comprehended a peerless sword intent. This was also the reason why everyone was shocked by Yiguchen. This was because not only did Yiguchen possess sword intent, but he also possessed dual sword intents. Not only did he possess two sword intents, one of them was a peerless sword intent. It's the legendary Azura sword intent of the 18 Purgatories of Blood. It's a sword intent that no one besides the Tower Master has comprehended. How could Yiguchen possibly? Many people stood there in a daze, and the shocked expressions on their faces did not fade away. Yiguchen? Murong Ditian's expression was extremely ugly. Sword intent had always been the thing that Murong Ditian yearned for the most. However, he had yet to comprehend it. On the other hand, his mortal enemy Yiguchen possessed dual sword intents. This kind of talent and fortuitous encounter made him gnash his teeth in hatred, but he also felt an extreme sense of powerlessness in his heart. Yuan Mie, Shen Tu Miao, and the others also had cold and solemn expressions. Yiguchen's strength was already on the same level as theirs. It even made them feel an extreme threat. On the other side, Su Jianshi and the other two also widened their eyes. However, Su Jianshi's eyes were overflowing with happiness. Yiguchen's strength made her feel astonished and pleasantly surprised. Not to mention the shock of the crowd, the one who was the most emotional was undoubtedly Xia Yubing. She originally thought that the dust had settled. She originally thought that victory was in her grasp. However, the instant Xia Yubing was freed, Yiguchen once again used such a shocking trump card. This made Xia Yubing extremely furious. She couldn't help but feel a sweetness in her throat as she spat out a mouthful of blood. Why? Xia Yubing's face was pale. At the same time, the hatred in her eyes couldn't be washed away. I obtained the North River Sword King's inheritance and even broke through to the Divine Soul Realm. I possess the Ice Sword Dao. Why aren't you dead? Still not dead? Still not dead. Xia Yubing's long blue hair fluttered in the wind. At this moment, it was as if she was possessed. Her Ice Sword Dao completely erupted. It was a killing move that put her life on the line. Xia Yubing, there's no point in talking anymore. It's over. Yiguchen's eyes were dyed with blood. His tone was cold. Secret soul-devouring technique. An extremely powerful suction force erupted from Yiguchen's body. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged into his body. His cultivation was already at the 9th cycle of qi refinement. Therefore, he could only advance in the direction of the Divine Soul Realm. Rumble. It was as if thunder was rumbling within Yiguchen's body. After attaining the invincible Vajra body, his body could contain even more spiritual energy. Therefore, the effect of the soul-devouring technique had also multiplied. Half-step Divine Soul Realm, breakthrough. Again, Yiguchen coldly shouted. He also wanted to make a final gamble. Golden light surged on his body as if there was a Buddha chanting. The sword in his hand was as red as blood. It was as if there was an Azura bathing in blood. Boom! Divine Soul Realm, breakthrough. A vast soul fluctuation spread out. With the help of the soul-devouring technique and the invincible Vajra body, Yiguchen had also stepped into the Divine Soul Realm. He stood in the same realm as Xia Yubing. Xia Yubing, let's settle this in one move, Yiguchen said. His eyes were like an Azuras. They were cold, emotionless, and filled with killing intent. Xia Yubing also seemed to have entered a trance. Her hair fluttered and her aura surged. One had the Ice Sword Dao after its transformation. The other had the peerless Azura sword intent. It was hard to say which of the two was stronger. However, at this moment, everyone's gaze was firmly fixed on the two of them. They were afraid that they would miss this shocking final confrontation. Ice Sword Dao, Ancient Profound Ice, Heaven Netherworld Absolute Sword, Soul Severing. Xia Yubing attacked with her sword. She released the Ice Sword Dao with all her strength. Together with the Ancient Profound Ice Sword Qi of the Ice Domain, she used the Heaven Netherworld Absolute Sword, a king-grade sword technique that truly belonged to the North River Sword King. The power of this move shook one's mind. Sword intent surged and cold light swept across the sky. The sky seemed to be frozen. This was a kind of aura that was determined to fight to the death. Facing Xia Yubing's final attack, Yiguchen also attacked with his sword. The Azura sword intent pierced through the sky and earth, tearing apart all directions and sweeping through the wilderness. He slowly raised the meteor soft sword in his hand. Blood-colored sword intent filled the air. He transformed into a killing god, transformed into an Azura, transformed into a sword demon. A pair of blood-red sword wings soared into the sky from Yiguchen's back. Countless clanging sounds rang out. It was as if millions of sword chi were resonating at the same time. It shook the heavens and earth and reversed the universe. 10,000 deities tribulation. Heaven and earth annihilation. Yiguchen attacked with his sword. The sword wings trembled and exploded, transforming into a pair of giant wings that were hundreds of feet long. The sword wings filled the sky, shaking the firmament. Moreover, this was not just the might of the 10,000 deities tribulation. It was also supported by the peerless Azura sword intent. Yiguchen's sword stunned everyone. 10,000 deities tribulation, heaven and earth annihilation. I use this sword to end all enmity. Yiguchen's voice rumbled in all directions. It was as if a deity had spoken. All those enmity, all those disputes, all those enmity had been resolved by this sword strike. Boom, an indescribable sword chi swept through the surroundings. Even the true energy barrier set up by the higher-ups of the 7 major forces was instantly torn apart by the sword chi. Watch out! Retreat! The densely packed crowd retreated rapidly. There were also sounds of people vomiting blood. Some of the sky prides who were slightly closer were affected and vomited blood. The higher-ups of the 7 major forces and the spiritual bridge realm experts took action again. True energy surged and spread in all directions, blocking the destructive shockwave. The ground cracked and the wind and clouds swept across. This was a battle that shocked everyone. It was destined to shake the entire Saint Origin dynasty. Endless smoke and dust rose into the air. After a full quarter of an hour, it was finally blown away by the wind. At this moment, the world was dead silent. Everyone held their breaths as they watched the final battle. Who won? Who lost? Chapter 209. As the dust settled, the shattered ground was revealed to everyone's eyes. Xia Yubing and Yiguchen were separated from each other by several tens of meters. The ground between them had already been damaged beyond recognition. Yiguchen's body was covered in blood. Countless bloody sword marks covered his body. His flesh was badly mutilated and looked extremely terrifying. Xia Yubing was the same. Her blue dress was dyed red with blood. Time seemed to have stopped. Xia Yubing's body was covered in blood. Her jade-like skin was covered in fine sword marks. At the same time, a deep wound appeared on her chest. Blood was gushing out. This was the power of the 10,000 gods' tribulation. It gathered the sword energy at a single point and suddenly exploded. It was an absolute killing move that was difficult to block. At this moment, Xia Yubing's hair was disheveled. Her hair was messy and stained with dark blood. Her entire body was in an extremely sorry state. There was not a single piece of undamaged skin. She no longer had the cold and arrogant appearance of an ice goddess. "You've lost," Yiguchen said indifferently. 3 simple words. His tone was incomparably calm. Xia Yubing's calculations, Xia Yubing's schemes, Xia Yubing's ambitions were all destroyed by Yiguchen's sword strike. At this moment, the hearts of all the spectators could not calm down. Xia Yubing, who they thought had a good chance of winning, had actually lost. Moreover, she had lost so miserably. She was like a fairy from the 9 heavens that had been banished to the mortal world and sunk into mud. Such a dramatic result made many people's bodies stiffen. They were dumbstruck. However, when they looked at Yiguchen, there was a sense of fear in their eyes. They could imagine that after defeating Xia Yubing, Yiguchen's reputation would rise to another level in the Saint Origin dynasty. He would even be like the sun at noon. As for the grudges in the Sword King's secret realm, no one mentioned it again. Even those cultivators who supported Xia Yubing were speechless at this moment. They could no longer make any sound. If the final victor was Xia Yubing, then Yi Guchen would definitely be beaten up by countless people and would be cursed endlessly. However, the victor was Yi Guchen. The winner is king, and the loser is a bandit. This was an unchanging truth. Seeing the hypocritical, mocking, and amused expressions one after another, Xia Yubing's face was as white as paper. Her smile was extremely miserable. Their gazes were originally directed at Yi Guchen, but now, they were all focused on her. Xia Yubing once again coughed out blood, mixed with her shattered internal organs. Yi Guchen's myriad deities' tribulation had already destroyed her heart meridians. The current Xia Yubing was merely struggling at death's door, her life like a candle in the wind. "Xia Yubing, it's over," said Yi Guchen. Although he had also suffered heavy injuries, he was clearly in a much better state than Xia Yubing. Xia Yubing's hair was disheveled as she began to laugh like a madman. Desolate laughter echoed in all directions. Many people sighed as they watched the once high and mighty heaven's pride turn into such a crazy and pathetic state. However, Yi Guchen's eyes did not waver in the slightest. From the moment Xia Yubing chose to cooperate with Gu Xiaoyang to attack him in the Sword King Mystery Realm, her miserable ending today was already set in stone. It could be said that the evils she brought upon herself were the hardest to bear. Yi Guchen did not feel the slightest bit of pity for Xia Yubing. "Yi Guchen, do you think you've won?" Xia Yubing opened her mouth, but blood was still gushing out from her mouth. Her life was like a candle in the wind. "So, you still have a trick up your sleeve?" Yi Guchen's eyes were very calm. He did not believe that Xia Yubing still had a trump card that could turn defeat into victory. "I have indeed lost, but this world is very big. Since you say that I'm a frog at the bottom of a well, and a summer insect cannot talk about ice, then what are you? In the eyes of a true heaven's pride, you are only an ant." Xia Yubing coughed out blood continuously, but her tone was extremely bitter. Although she was in a miserable state, a trace of vengeful madness suddenly appeared in her eyes at this moment. The origin ring on her finger flashed, and a jade scroll overflowing with starlight appeared in her hand. Xia Yubing poured the last of her true qi into the jade scroll and then fiercely crushed it. Yi Guchen's eyebrows twitched, and his figure instantly rushed towards Xia Yubing, sending her flying with a kick. "Puchi!" Xia Yubing once again spat out a large mouthful of blood. Her sternum cracked, and she fiercely smashed into the ground, falling into a pool of blood. However, the Starlight Jade Scroll had already been shattered. Following the shattering of the Jade Scroll, an indescribable fluctuation spread out with a loud rumble. Soon after, everyone was somewhat shocked to see that the space in the air violently shook. Countless starlight condensed and formed, and in the end, formed a Starlight Gate. The Starlight Gate rippled with boundless and deep fluctuations, as if it was the door of a god. "That's..." Yi Guchen's eyes darkened. Many martial warriors also looked at the starry sky gate in bewilderment. "That's a spatial tunnel." Ordinary practitioners were not too clear about it, but the higher-ups of the seven great powers all knew that it was the fluctuation of a spatial tunnel. Such a method of constructing a spatial tunnel was clearly not something that Xia Yubing had the qualifications to come into contact with. However, they were all very puzzled as they did not know where Xia Yubing's spatial jade scroll came from. Only Xia Yubing herself, after seeing the Starlight Gate, revealed a vicious smile. "Yi Guchen, do you think you can win just because you defeated me? No, you will forever be someone else's stepping stone." Rumble. The Starlight Gate trembled, and spatial ripples spread out in all directions. This unforeseen event was out of everyone's expectations. Everyone's gazes blankly looked at the Starlight Gate. The heavens and earth seemed to be silent, and time slowly passed. Finally, the Starlight Gate slowly opened, and two figures with true chi wings on their backs slowly flew out. This was a pair of godlike young man and woman. Their temperaments were extraordinary, and they had an innate aura of superiority. However, when he saw the young man, Yi Guchen's eyes suddenly focused. Immediately, Uncontrollable hatred and anger surged within him. This was practically Yiguchen's instinctive reaction. That hatred gushed out from every pore of his body, and he was simply unable to suppress it. The young man wore the Big Dipper robe and wore the Mizar star crown on his head. His face was handsome, and his skin contained the splendor of stars. He was like an innate god, and his body was surrounded by specks of starlight. The true chi wings on his back revealed his powerful life and death threshold realm. At such a young age, such a realm, in the entire Saint Origin dynasty, there was no one who could rival him. The young man did not speak, and only calmly stood there, as if he had a strange temperament, causing everyone's gazes to fall on him. This was a kind of momentum, as if he was the center of the heavens and earth. The resplendent starlight emitted endless brilliance, causing everyone's attention to be involuntarily attracted to him. It could be said that no matter where this young man went, he would be the center of attention and would be worshipped from all directions. Beside the young man was a girl wearing a starry cloud robe. The girl was also an expert of the life and death threshold realm. Her face was like jade, and her eyes were like stars. She carried an unfathomable sense of nobility and arrogance. Above the vault of heaven, there seemed to be starlight surging. This was a strange phenomenon that caused one's heart to palpitate. As the young man and woman stood amidst the starlight, they were like gods, and their auras covered the entire place. How could my Starry Universe Sword Pavilion's Starry Sky Passage be teleported here? Junior brother, could it be that you're mistaken? The girl spoke, and her gaze swept across everyone present. Her beautiful eyes carried a trace of arrogance and disdain. That's right. This teleportation jade strip was given to her by me. I never thought that she would actually use it. The young man spoke, and his gaze fell slightly. He saw Xia Yubing lying in a pool of blood, looking extremely miserable. Then, his gaze shifted again, and fell on Yiguchen. Yiguchen also looked over, and their gazes met for the first time. Time seemed to have frozen at this moment. Pu, Cha, Young. Chapter 210. The young man who had appeared from the Starry Gate was Gu Xiaoyang, the proud son of Starry Sword Pavilion who had destroyed Yiguchen's sword vein and taken away his innate sword embryo. Yiguchen's tone was extremely cold, and the killing intent in his heart soared uncontrollably. Their gazes collided in the void, and sparks seemed to fly. Gu Xiaoyang had a calm temperament, and his eyes were as deep as the stars. No one would have guessed that he was the young man who had cruelly taken away Yiguchen's innate sword embryo with the secret skill of wedding dress. The pain of his flesh being peeled off was still imprinted in Yiguchen's soul. The innate sword embryo was the foundation of Yiguchen's strength as a 7th grade heaven's pride. Moreover, the innate sword embryo was a gifted ability that had existed in Yiguchen's dantian since birth. Gu Xiaoyang's cruel secret skill of wedding dress was like digging out Yiguchen's heart and lungs. Yiguchen would never forget the despair of having his talent taken away. Gu Xiaoyang, who had brought Yiguchen such despair, was also the enemy he had to kill. Now, his blood feud was right in front of him. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Looking at Gu Xiaoyang and the others standing in the sky, the surrounding warriors were almost suffocating. Although many of them did not know Gu Xiaoyang's identity, the way he appeared made it clear that his background was not simple. The people from the 7 great forces vaguely knew something, and they all looked at Gu Xiaoyang with a solemn expression. Starry Sword Pavilion was an overlord force in the Nantian region. It was one of the 4 great sword pavilions, and it had an extraordinary background. In the current sword pavilion, there were even 7 extraordinary geniuses that soared into the world, and they were called the 7 Great Bears by the outside world. Gu Xiaoyang was one of the 7 Great Bears, Kaiyang. I heard that Yiguchen has a grudge against Gu Xiaoyang. His innate sword embryo was taken away by Gu Xiaoyang. That's right. Yiguchen is already so monstrous now. If his innate sword embryo hadn't been snatched away, how strong would his innate talent be? However, things don't seem to be looking good right now. The sky prides of the Starry Sword Pavilion aren't people that can be trifled with. The people of the 7 major forces were whispering to each other. They were all discussing. Young Master Gu, save Yubing. When Xia Yubing, who was lying in a pool of blood and on the verge of death, saw Gu Xiaoyang appear, an intense desire to live emerged on her blood-stained face. In her eyes, only Gu Xiaoyang had the ability to save her. Gu Xiaoyang glanced at Xia Yubing indifferently and said, "Xia Yubing, you've disappointed me too much. In the Sword King's secret realm, you said that if you obtained the Sword King's inheritance, you would be able to completely eliminate the hidden danger Yiguchen. But now, you need to crush a spatial jade strip and ask me for help. You're wasting my time." What? Hearing Gu Xiaoyang's words, everyone was stunned. From Gu Xiaoyang's words, they were able to hear a deeper meaning. Ignoring Xia Yubing's deathly pale face, Gu Xiaoyang said with faint disappointment, "I admire your ambition and your unwillingness to submit to others. In addition, I also need an innate sword embryo. That's why I agreed to help you cripple Yiguchen. In the end, you're actually in such a miserable state right now. How disappointing." Gu Xiaoyang's words were like a huge rock thrown into the ocean, causing a huge wave to rise. What? It wasn't Yiguchen who plotted against Xia Yubing in the Sword King's secret realm, but Xia Yubing herself harbored evil intentions and asked Gu Xiaoyang to help her? I never thought that Xia Yubing would be such a bitch. Doesn't that mean we've all misunderstood the sword sect? The sword sect's Yiguchen is the true victim. Xia Yubing is that vicious bitch. Gu Xiaoyang's words had undoubtedly revealed the truth of the Sword King's secret realm. To Gu Xiaoyang, he didn't care about the clamoring of these ants. However, Xia Yubing's face was ashen, as if she'd lost all hope. Her mask had finally been mercilessly taken off at this moment. Everyone saw her dark and ugly side. Soon after, she felt numerous gazes land on her. It was no longer the worship, respect, and admiration of the past. Instead, it was disdain, coldness, and ridicule. They were looking at her as if they were looking at the dirtiest thing in the world. It's not like that. To someone like Xia Yubing, these gazes were undoubtedly like being sliced into pieces. It made her feel so much pain that she wished she was dead. It was even to the extent that she saw Xia Yinger and her other relatives looking at her with pale faces from these gazes. No. Impossible. So Yiguchen wasn't in the wrong. It was Big Sister Yubing. Why? Xia Yinger was simply about to go crazy. This sort of disparity caused her to lose her mind. As for those who'd insulted Yiguchen and called him a despicable person and a hypocrite, their cheeks were burning with pain. They felt so ashamed that they couldn't show their faces and wanted nothing more than to find a hole to hide in. Pucci, as if she couldn't take any more blows, Xia Yubing's eyes were filled with incomparable hatred. She was so angry that a large mouthful of blood spurted out. Yubing, I regret. These were Xia Yubing's last words. She completely fell into a pool of blood. Her life force was gone. Her eyes were filled with unreconciled despair and extreme regret. She died with her eyes wide open. The heaven's proud daughter that was admired by tens of thousands of people died under everyone's disdain and curses. This could be said to be the greatest irony. Seeing Xia Yubing's life force completely cut off, Yiguchen felt a trace of worry disappear from the bottom of his heart. It was as if a knot had been untied. Although Xia Yubing had died, an even greater danger was in front of him. Yiguchen's gaze was firmly fixed on the youth standing in the sky. Gu Xiaoyang was an even more powerful and terrifying enemy than Xia Yubing. No matter if it was identity, strength, or background, Yiguchen was far too lacking compared to Gu Xiaoyang. Junior brother, this is the pitiful person whose innate sword embryo was stolen by you. Isn't he a bit too weak? Beside Gu Xiaoyang, the beautiful woman wearing a starry cloud robe laughed contemptuously. She was one of the 7 great bears, the Alcade Star. Her name was Song Yao. Gu Xiaoyang shook his head slightly and said casually, "Yeah, I thought Xia Yubing would be able to solve this problem. But in the end, she's also a piece of trash. I still need to do it myself." Gu Xiaoyang. Yiguchen held the meteor soft sword. His eyes were cold and sharp. His body was like an abyss as a blood-colored sword intent soared into the sky and filled the sky. Oh, sword intent? Gu Xiaoyang looked at Yiguchen. His starry eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. Song Yuyao was also a bit surprised. She said, "Tisk Tiske, a 7th grade prodigy with a peerless sword intent. If junior brother didn't steal his innate sword embryo and cripple his cultivation, he shouldn't be as weak as he is now." "So what if he has sword intent?" Gu Xiaoyang said with a cold smile. He slowly raised his hand and a similarly vast sword intent surged out. The entire sky almost instantly turned into a starry sky. Spots of light flickered. They were all the sharpness of the sword qi. This was Gu Xiaoyang's starry sword intent. It was also a peerless sword intent. Gosh, Gu Xiaoyang also has sword intent. Many people were shocked. They looked at the dark starry sky. There was a chilling sword qi surging in it. Sword intent was something that only 1 in 10,000 sword cultivators could have. But Gu Xiaoyang was one of the 7 great bears of the Starry Sword Pavilion. It would be surprising if he didn't have sword intent. "I am Gu Xiaoyang of the Starry Sword Pavilion. Today I want to kill Yiguchen. Whoever stops me will be exterminated." Chapter 211. Gu Xiaoyang put his hands behind his back and said indifferently. He had the right to be arrogant and had the confidence to say such words. After fusing with Yiguchen's innate sword embryo and his own star eyes, he became a 7th grade genius. He was highly valued by the Starry Sword Pavilion and stood out from the 7 Big Dipper warriors, becoming one of the seeds of the Starry Sword Pavilion. As soon as Gu Xiaoyang said that, gasps could be heard from all directions. This was too overbearing. He did not take the 7 major forces seriously and wanted to kill Yiguchen. Many warriors looked at the 7 major forces because Yiguchen was now the champion of the elite club. Gu Xiaoyang's presumptuous request to kill Yiguchen was a violation of the rules of the elite club. However, it was out of everyone's expectation that the higher-ups of the 7 forces were all looking at Gu Xiaoyang with cold and solemn faces. Even the Sun Moon Hall master of the Limitless Sword sect, Xian Tai, did not say a word. He frowned and seemed to be thinking about something. They were not afraid of Gu Xiaoyang. After all, no matter how talented Gu Xiaoyang was, he was only at the life and death realm. The 7 major forces were not afraid of him. They were afraid of the Starry Sword Pavilion behind Gu Xiaoyang. Perhaps most warriors did not know much about the Starry Sword Pavilion, but the people of the 7 major forces knew a thing or two. Lord Feng Manlu. Chu Qingqi wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Feng Manlu's eyes were still empty, but he knew what was going on with his soul sense. However, his expression did not change at all. "Alright, let's wait and see," Feng Manlu whispered. Looking at the 7 major forces who remained silent, the warriors below felt their hearts skip a beat. Obviously, Gu Xiaoyang's identity as a genius of the Starry Sword Pavilion had intimidated them and they could not stop him. Seeing that there was no one in the way, Gu Xiaoyang smiled contemptuously. He looked at Yiguchen expressionlessly. It was as if he was not looking at a person, but an ant that he could crush at any time. "Yiguchen, your sword vein was destroyed and your sword embryo was taken away. It is indeed beyond my expectations that you could come this far and defeat Xia Yubing, who inherited the Sword King's inheritance." Gu Xiaoyang said indifferently. "Gu Xiaoyang, it won't be that easy for you to kill me." Yiguchen's face was cold. He had just fought a great battle with Xia Yubing and was heavily injured. It was difficult for him to display his full strength. Moreover, even if Yiguchen was at his peak state, he would not be able to fight with Gu Xiaoyang, who was to life and death realm. This was the difference in their backgrounds. However, there was no fear in Yiguchen's eyes at all. His azura to the god. Yiguchen wanted to sever the 3 strands of karma. Now that Bei Dengue and Xia Yubing were dead, only Gu Xiaoyang was left. Yiguchen even remembered what his aunt, Xian Su, had said. When he could defeat Gu Xiaoyang and take back his innate sword embryo, Xian Su would tell him some things, including his background and his parents. Therefore, no matter what, Yiguchen must kill Gu Xiaoyang. However, the difference in cultivation between him and Gu Xiaoyang was too big. It was hard to say if he could even survive this. Actually, it doesn't matter to me whether I kill you or not. We are not from the same world. I should even thank you." Gu Xiaoyang paused and then smiled. "If not for your innate sword embryo, I would not have broken through life and death realms so quickly and become the leader of the 7 great bears. I would not have obtained the title of one of the top 10 young masters and become young master Nebula of the Starry Sword Pavilion. If not for your innate sword embryo, I would not have become the 9th on the Dragon Phoenix list of the South Horizon region. If not for your innate sword embryo, I would not have won the favor of Yi Tongyue, the peerless fairy of the Misty Sword Pavilion. She is an 8th grade genius and has the innate divine embryo. She can resonate with the innate sword embryo. When she comes out of seclusion in 2 years, I can dual cultivate with her and comprehend the innate indestructible sword embryo together. All of this is because of you, Yi Guchen. So, don't you think I should thank you?" Gu Xiaoyang smiled sincerely, as if he was really thanking Yi Guchen. However, the more sincere he was, the more it represented his ridicule and contempt for Yi Guchen. This was a straightforward mockery. He wanted to see Yi Guchen's anger, unwillingness, and extreme despair. Because he, who stood at the top, would occasionally see the anger of an ant. It was interesting. However, what made Gu Xiaoyang's smile disappear was that Yi Guchen's face was expressionless. Even the anger that was almost instinctive to the bone had calmed down. "Yi Guchen, don't you have any thoughts about my gratitude?" Gu Xiaoyang asked in a slightly heavy tone. "Is it necessary?" Yi Guchen looked straight at Gu Xiaoyang. "Bei Dengui wanted to plot against me, but he died at my hands. Xia Yubing wanted to replace me and take everything from me, but she also died at my hands. And you, Gu Xiaoyang, although you took my innate sword embryo, you will still die at my hands in the future." Yi Guchen's tone was calm, as if he was saying something very ordinary. However, these words made Gu Xiaoyang's eyes darken. Before Gu Xiaoyang could say anything, Song Yuyao, who was beside him, laughed as if she had heard the funniest joke. "Heh, how interesting. To actually meet such an ant who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Junior brother, it seems that after you took his sword embryo, even his mind became abnormal." Song Yuyao's tone was quite vicious. As one of the 7 great bears of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, she had always thought highly of herself and looked down on others. After Gu Xiaoyang merged with Yi Guchen's sword embryo and became the seed of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, Song Yuyao had completely thrown herself into his embrace. At this moment, when she heard Yi Guchen say such words, she naturally couldn't accept it. She felt as if she had heard the biggest joke in the world. "Although Xia Yubing's vision is short, Yi Guchen, your vision isn't that long either. A frog at the bottom of a well like you naturally doesn't know how vast the South Horizon region is." Gu Xiaoyang shook his head. He didn't say anything else. The true energy in his body gathered, and the sea of qi in his dantian and mind rolled. Rumble. The sky filled with stars seemed to be rolling, and endless sword intent surged. As a terrifying heaven's pride at the life and death chamber, Gu Xiaoyang's casual attack was far more powerful than Xia Yubing's ultimate move. Every single star in the sky turned into a ray of sword qi. They fell like rain, carrying the power of the stars as they charged toward Yi Guchen. He didn't directly use his ultimate move because he still wanted to see Yi Guchen struggle to survive under his hands. Facing the starry sword qi that filled the sky, Yi Guchen's eyes turned blood red. He didn't give up. Holding the meteor soft sword, a terrifying Shura sword intent surged out. "Gu Xiaoyang, whatever moves you have, use them." Yi Guchen was like a moth flying into a flame, releasing the purest Shura sword intent. Even if his body was burned, he would wash the sky with blood. Like boiling a frog in warm water, he slowly increased the power. He wanted to see Yi Guchen struggle to survive under his hands and finally die in despair. This scene made many warriors' hearts tremble, and some girls' eyes even turned red. A young sword grandmaster of the Saint Origin dynasty was betrayed by his childhood sweetheart. His sword vein was destroyed, and his sword embryo was stolen. He had to bear the infamy of being innocent, but he still endured the humiliation and rose again in the end. He defeated the Sword King's inheritance, Xia Yubing. It could be said that this was not something an ordinary person could do, but Yi Guqin did it. But now, Yi Guqin was fighting an unfair battle with Gu Xiaoyang. Is Sword Grandmaster Yi Guqin going to die like this? What a pity! Someone sighed. He was like a blazing sun, rising strongly, but he's going to fall so soon? How sad, how sad. Although most of the warriors were sighing, there were still some who rejoiced in Yi Guqin's misfortune. For example, Qin Baizhan and the other two experts, Lu Tianying, Xian Ying, Murong Ditian, and Prince Yuanyi all had a carefree smile on their faces. They were very happy to see Yi Guqin fall. Because Yi Guqin's performance was too stunning. It was like a thorn stuck in their throats. If they didn't get rid of it, they wouldn't feel at ease. Looking at the one-sided suppression, many warriors turned their faces away. They couldn't bear to watch anymore. In the sky, Song Yuyao looked at Yi Guqin, who was struggling under Gu Xiaoyang's attacks, with great interest. Gu Xiaoyang was very undisciplined and casual. Very weak, too weak. Such an exceptional sword intent was actually comprehended by you. It's simply a waste of a heavenly treasure. Gu Xiaoyang shook his head. Then he condensed his words and said, "Since you are also a 9th-generation sword grandmaster, then I will let you see what a true sword grandmaster's absolute art is." After Gu Xiaoyang finished speaking, he slowly raised his hand. With a loud bang, a shocking sword aura filled the air. It wasn't the power of the star's sword intent, but an ultimate move. Of course, anyone could see that it wasn't a complete sword move. However, its power was enough to make people tremble in fear. Sun-slashing brilliant void sword aura. With a bang, sword aura burst out from Gu Xiaoyang's palm. A red sword aura seemed to cross the sky, as if it was going to slash the sun. That kind of fluctuation was shocking. Sword Grandmaster's absolute art. Yi Guqin's eyes narrowed. The Sword Grandmaster's absolute art of the Sword Grandmaster's lineage was the absolute art created by each generation of Sword Grandmasters. The only thing Yi Guqin knew now was that he was refining the unique skill of the 8th-generation Sword Master, the 108,000 heaven-splitting sword souls, and the unique skill of the 7th-generation Sword Master, the sacred sword of heaven and earth, which he had performed once. Obviously, the sun-slashing brilliant void sword aura that Gu Xiaoyang was displaying was also an absolute art of the Sword Grandmaster's lineage. Although Gu Xiaoyang hadn't fully displayed this absolute art, its power was already shocking. Sword Soul Go! Yi Guqin's blood and qi rumbled. His 1,000-feet-long golden sea of qi was circulating to its limit. Coupled with the soul-devouring secret technique, his cultivation had already reached the divine soul realm. Therefore, this time, Yi Guqin didn't use 5,000 sword souls of the heaven-splitting sword, but 10,000 of them. Tens of thousands of sky-splitting sword souls swept out of Yi Guqin's body like a shocking torrent. The power of the heaven-splitting sword souls was calculated by numbers. The more there were, the stronger the combined power. At this moment, the 10,000 swords were unleashed together. The sword aura buzzed as if it had formed a giant azure sword aura dragon. It circled around Yi Guqin and soared into the sky. This scene was extremely shocking. Yi Guqin actually hid this move. What kind of move is this? I didn't expect the Sword Grandmaster to hold back when he was fighting Xia Yubing. He didn't display his full power. Many cultivators were stunned. Some were speechless. At this moment, Yi Guqin's extraordinary performance once again shocked them. Oh, it's also the Sword Grandmaster's secret technique? As a 9th-generation Sword Grandmaster, Gu Xiaoyang immediately sensed that Yi Guqin's move was also the Sword Grandmaster's secret technique. However, in Gu Xiaoyang's opinion, although the power of this move had exceeded his expectations, it still couldn't change anything. With a loud bang, the brilliant void sword qi of the sun-slashing sword hit the torrent of heaven-splitting sword souls. As expected, after blocking it for a moment, the scarlet sword light tore through the heaven-splitting sword soul torrent. This wasn't because the heaven-splitting sword soul torrent was inferior to the brilliant void sword aura. It was because their cultivation realms weren't on the same level. Yi Guqin directly used Luo Tian's protection and was swept by the sword light. The brilliant void sword aura was like a hot knife cutting through cheese. It directly cut through the guardian Vajra's shadow. Even though Yi Guqin had the indestructible Vajra body, a huge sword wound opened on his chest. Pucci. Yi Guqin's body crashed to the ground. His body was covered in blood and his aura was weak. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.